Chapter 382. After a night of talking, Li Daochong, Yi Feiyue, and Lu Ming all drank a lot of spirit wine. The next day, Lu Ming went back to his family. Yi Feiyue applied for a student loan from Tsinghua University on the spiritual net and contacted the teacher who recommended her. Yi Feiyue couldn't take the shuttle. Once she booked a ticket, she would probably be caught on the shuttle. Although Yi Yunlong and Taoist Master Kumu were scared away by Li Daochong, the Black Tortoise Yi family would never give up. With Yi Feiyue's ability, there was no way she could resist. However, Yi Feiyue didn't ask Li Daochong for help. Li Daochong had done enough in the Battle of Spirit Lake Villa. Yi Feiyue didn't want to bother Li Daochong anymore. She still had a long way to go and had to rely on herself. Yi Feiyue asked the teacher whether she could send Tsinghua University's exclusive shuttle to Blue Bay Star to pick her up. Not to mention the higher-ups of Blue Bay Star, even the Black Tortoise Yi family didn't dare to interfere with Tsinghua University's shuttle. However, the reply Yi Feiyue got was that her level wasn't high enough to pick her up. She was told to go on her own. This made Yi Feiyue worried. Without the protection of Tsinghua University, she couldn't even get out of Tianyuan City, let alone Blue Bay Star. Yi Feiyue tried to contact several friends but didn't get any reply. They all thought of her as a plague and avoided her. From morning to night, Yi Feiyue had been looking for a way to leave Blue Bay Star without being spied on by the Yi family. Yi Feiyue contacted black, white, and gray people. She even took the risk of going to the underground city, and took out all her savings to buy the transportation shuttle from the underground forces. But it was all in vain. No one was willing to take the risk. Of course, it was also because Yi Feiyue didn't pay enough. A few days ago, the Yi family had cut off Yi Feiyue's source of funds. She was only left with a small private account in which she stored her savings over the years. But because of the high consumption of cultivation, Yi Feiyue didn't save much money. After the cut, there were only 3 million Federation coins left in the account. For ordinary people, this was a huge sum of money. But for cultivators, it wasn't money at all. Especially for geniuses like Yi Feiyue, who could enter the circle of high-level cultivators, 3 million Federation coins wasn't worth mentioning. The underground city's desperados of the underground city wouldn't care about 3 million Federation. Although the news of what had happened in the Spirit Lake Villa had been blocked by the upper echelons and underground forces were well aware of it. Taking Yi Feiyue out of the Indigo Bay Star and offending the Black Tortoise Yi family for 3 million? Impossible, absolutely impossible. Don't even think about it if you don't have 300 million. When she left to her, she had to go in Feiyue's you. She night was night, night's left was left night. She was hotel was home was to stay stayed was. In fact, it wasn't a secret that she was staying in Li Daochong's Yu mansion. The Yi family definitely knew about it. It was just that they didn't dare to catch her here. They didn't even dare to approach the Yu mansion. Everyone knew that Li Daochong's telekinesis was powerful and that the slightest movement would be noticed. Over the past few days, the cultivators of Blue Bay Star had more or less figured out Li Daochong's character and characteristic. It could be summed up in 2 words. He had no scruples. Li Daochong almost never provoked anyone. But if you provoked him, no matter who you were or what kind of background you had, he would beat you up and kill you regardless of the consequences. Li Daochong gave a very good interpretation of a popular internet phrase on the spiritual nexus recently. If you aren't ruthless, you won't be able to stand firm. You'll do it. If you dare to come, I'll dare to beat and kill you. Everyone felt that Li Daochong's stupidity was still there. Compared to the past, he just had a normal way of thinking and powerful strength. Nothing else had changed. And this kind of person was the scariest. Therefore, with the Yu mansion as the center, no one dared to approach within a radius of 15 kilometers. This was also the reason why Yi Feiyue was able to disguise herself and conceal her aura to avoid the Yi family's detection. Otherwise, she would have been caught the moment she stepped out of the Yu mansion. Yi Jingtian said that he would pretend that he didn't have this daughter and that he was the only one. There were other people in the Blue Bay Star Yi family and the Black Tortoise Yi family behind them. Yi Feiyue walked in the dark alley outside the Yu mansion. Her expression was lonely and her eyes were lifeless. Her fairy-like face was haggard and carried a bit of sadness. Cultivation was difficult, and it was even more difficult for a woman to cultivate. All her paths were blocked. Yi Feiyue clenched her jade-like hands so tightly that her nails dug deep into her palms. Her delicate body trembled as she resisted the urge to cry. There was only one path left in front of her, which was to ask Li Daochong for help. However, Li Daochong had already offended the Black Tortoise Yi family for her last night. This also indirectly caused him to offend the entire Blue Bay Star. Yi Feiyue already felt that it would be very difficult for her to repay this favor. If she also let Li Daochong send her away, that would be tantamount to creating an irreconcilable enmity between Li Daochong and the Black Tortoise Yi family. Yi Feiyue clearly knew how much the Black Tortoise Yi family wanted her to inherit their bloodline. The outside world still didn't know that she had been accepted by the University of Tsinghua. The reason why Taoist Master Ku Mu chose to avoid Li Daochong last night was that he was sure that she wouldn't be able to escape from the Black Tortoise Yi family. If Taoist Master Ku Mu knew that she had been accepted by the University of Tsinghua, he would definitely contact his family and directly activate the teleportation array to send a great expert over. No matter how strong Li Daochong was, he still wasn't a match for Jin Dan late stage and Jin Dan peak stage cultivators. If one wasn't enough, then two. If two weren't enough, then three. If that still wasn't enough, then there was still cultivator Yuanying. Yi Feiyue knew that if she continued to let Li Daochong help her, then she would really drag him down with her. Standing in front of the old residence, Yi Feiyue sighed and looked up at the sky. The night sky was filled with stars, and one of the stars was where she wanted to go. However, she couldn't go. If she became a Jin Dan at this moment, she would definitely break through the void. Even if a Jin Dan cultivator wasn't enough to soar through the starry sky, she would still leave Blue Bay Star regardless of everything else. However, she still had a long way to go before she could reach Jin Dan. An early Foundation establishment cultivator simply couldn't fly beyond the heavens. Yi Feiyue raised her hand several times, wanting to push open the door of the old residence. However, when she touched the door, she immediately withdrew her hand. After repeating this 4 or 5 times, Yi Feiyue suddenly withdrew her hand. Her beautiful eyes revealed a firm expression as she turned around and left. If she couldn't leave Blue Bay Star, then she would hide in the barren mountains and imitate ancient cultivators to open up an immortal's cave and cultivate bitterly. Although her talent couldn't be said to be heaven-defying, it could still be considered in the upper echelons. How could she not reach Jin Dan after cultivating for 60 years? Yi Feiyue's character was unyielding. If she said she wouldn't marry Yi Yunlong, then she definitely wouldn't, even if she died. Yi Feiyue turned around and took a deep breath. She then strode out of the old residence. Creak! Yi Feiyue had just taken 2 steps when the old wooden door of the old residence opened with a grinding sound. "Where are you going?" Li Daochong's soft voice came from behind. "I don't know." Yi Feiyue stopped and didn't turn around. She bit her lower lip and replied, "I've been waiting for you all afternoon. If you came back half an hour later, that military shuttle would have taken off. If you go now, you should still be able to catch up," Li Daochong said indifferently. Yi Feiyue's body trembled. Her eyes were hazy with tears and her delicate body couldn't stop trembling. A moment of silence. Whoosh! Yi Feiyue suddenly turned around and ran to Li Daochong, hugging him tightly. Li Daochong didn't move. He allowed Yi Feiyue to hug him tightly. The soft touch on his chest was incomparably clear. Under the night light, Li Daochong's face seemed to be flushed, but the dim light made it difficult to see. Dao Chong, aren't you afraid that I'll fall for you if you help me like this? After a short while, Yi Feiyue abruptly said. We don't have much time. I'll take you there, Li Daochong said as if he didn't hear her. With that, Song ink appeared out of thin air and turned into a streak of light that landed at the feet of Li Daochong and Yi Feiyue. With a whoosh, it flew away at an extremely low altitude. In just a few minutes it was outside Tianyuan City and entered a mountain range. Then, Song ink flew into the night sky like a bolt of lightning. Yi Feiyue stood on Song ink, still hugging Li Daochong. Her small head was quietly buried in the latter's sturdy chest. Her pretty face was already flushed red. The girl's maiden heart couldn't help but surge at this moment. More than 10 minutes later, they arrived at a barren mountain valley. A pitch-black, almost invisible shuttle appeared in front of them. If it weren't for his telekinesis, even Li Daochong wouldn't have been able to see the shuttle's location. After landing, the shuttle's hatch opened and Yu Yan walked out in her Federation military uniform. Chapter 383. When Yu Yan came out and saw Yi Feiyue hugging Li Daochong, she said with a hint of jealousy, "Oh, little Chong Chong, you're usually so well-behaved, but it turns out that you're actually a coquettish man. Do you specialize in seducing girls on dark nights?" Yi Feiyue hurriedly let go of Li Daochong. She was so embarrassed that she wanted nothing more than to find a hole to hide in. Get on. Commander Yu is the commander of the Northwest Legion's Vanguard Corps. This shuttle is under the direct control of the military, and the Yi family's hands can't reach here. Commander Yu just so happens to be on his way to the Central Starfield. I'll take you to St. Hua University on the way, Li Daochong said indifferently. Yi Feiyue's heart was beating wildly. She responded and hurriedly got on the shuttle. Yu Yan walked up to Li Daochong and sized him up. It's only been half a month, and you've gotten stronger again. Little Chong Chong, you're really a pervert. Are you really not going to consider joining my Vanguard Corps? The benefits are definitely more than you can imagine. Li Daochong curled his lips. We'll talk about it later. Yu Yan's eyes lit up. You've always rejected me, but this time it's a little different. What? You fancy me too? Wasn't it enough to hit on that girl just now? This woman was always shooting her mouth off. Li Daochong felt helpless and didn't want to continue talking to her. Whoosh! Suddenly, a gust of wind blew over. Yu Yan raised her leg and kicked Li Daochong's crotch. It was extremely sudden. Smack! Li Daochong instantly leaned to the side and grabbed Yu Yan's ankle with great force. Ouch, 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 be gentle, it hurts. Yu Yan cried out. Li Daochong acted as if he didn't hear her and pulled her ankle up to her shoulder. Yu Yan stood on one leg and raised the other leg to her head. This pose of standing in a split was absolutely mesmerizing. Li Daochong was very grateful to Yu Yan for helping him so much, but this woman's way of doing things was always unusual. There were many unexpected situations that could easily annoy people. Fortunately, Li Daochong's strength and reaction was fast enough. Otherwise, if it were anyone else, they would have been crippled and unable to have any descendants. Yu Yan suddenly didn't hold back in her kick. Perhaps she didn't use her full strength, but it was more than enough to break his balls. What was this woman thinking in her head? She was hard to fathom. Commander Yu, I'll have to trouble you to take care of my friend on the way back. I'll be going to the front lines in a few days. If there's anything I can help with, please don't hesitate to ask. Li Daochong didn't reduce the strength in his hand as he spoke calmly. All right, I'll be waiting for you at any time. I'll return once I'm done with the handover at the Central Starfield. The front lines aren't idle at all. It's hell there. You have to consider this carefully. Don't blame me for not reminding you. Yu Yan's expression froze as she spoke with a faint smile. Li Daochong loosened his grip and let go of Yu Yan's leg. He nodded slightly and flew into the sky. Yu Yan looked at the Tsang ink starlight in the sky and muttered, I hope the 9-ring star field hasn't been breached by the time you arrive. Only when the Tsang ink starlight in the night sky disappeared did Yu Yen return to the flying space shuttle and close the door. Not long after, a dazzling light shone in the valley. A military flying space shuttle with a diameter of over 500 meters soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, it had left the blue bay star's atmosphere and entered the boundless starry sky. Yi Feiyue was arranged to stay in a clean and tidy room. She sat by the bed for a while before getting up and entering the bathroom to take a hot shower to wash away the fatigue of the day. Thud! Yi Feiyue had just taken off her outer robe when she heard a heavy object fall to the ground. She looked down and saw that it was a storage bag. She opened it. Yi Feiyue's tears flowed down. The storage bag contained tens of thousands of mid-grade spirit stones and a universal storage spirit card. Yi Feiyue used her telekinesis to probe the spirit card, and a string of numbers immediately appeared before her eyes. There was a total of 5 billion Federation coins. This huge sum of money was enough for Yi Feiyue to complete her studies at St. Hua University without worrying about the lack of cultivation resources. Thank you. Yi Feiyue held the spirit card to her chest and muttered. Li Daochong returned to the old mansion to continue his unfinished work. With the usnia venom from Princess Catherine's fangs, the crafting of a level 10 spirit talisman was already on the agenda. The materials provided by old Devil Zhang were enough for Li Daochong to craft a level 10 spirit talisman. However, he couldn't fail. If he did, he would have to wait for another month. Princess Catherine could only secrete 10 milliliters of usnia venom every month, and this amount was barely enough to craft a single spirit talisman. Li Daochong had already completed the spirit sequence. All that was left was to use the recording device to draw the spirit talisman. Li Daochong repeatedly checked the spirit sequence to see if there were any omissions. If there were any errors in the spirit sequence, the spirit talisman drawn by the recording device would be scrapped. After checking it 3 times and confirming that there were no errors, Li Daochong took a deep breath and pressed the draw button. Soon after, the recording device began to operate. The prepared ink was drawn on the talisman paper from the recording pen. The lines were uniform and distinct, with different thicknesses. Each stroke could drive the power of law. Li Daochong held his breath as he watched the spirit talisman take shape. A few minutes later, the level 10 fire talisman was completed. Li Daochong took off the spirit talisman and heaved a sigh of relief. It was a success. Tomorrow, Li Daochong planned to go to the spatial fissure under the Heavenly Palace Club. Crafting this level 10 fire talisman was like forcing a duck onto a perch. On the other side of the spatial fissure was an unknown area. Even though Li Daochong's current strength couldn't be compared to before, he already possessed a strong ability to protect himself. But just to be on the safe side, Li Daochong still felt that carrying a level 10 spirit talisman with him would give him more confidence. This way, even if he encountered a powerful soul catcher, he would be able to put up a fight. After crafting, Li Daochong put away the spirit talisman and fell asleep. He had hardly slept these days. He had been meditating and cultivating. Jindan had failed. Li Daochong still needed to sleep after all. His spirit body had just taken shape, and he still needed to continue to cultivate to perfection before he could truly be reborn. Early the next morning, Li Daochong only told Yin Ping that he was going to the Heavenly Palace Club. After arriving, Li Daochong didn't disturb Lu Feng and the shuttle gang. He went directly underground and came to the area where the spatial fissure was formed. Compared with 10 days ago, the fissure was obviously open, and it was big enough for one person to pass through. The death chi coming from the other side was strong and turbid. If an ordinary person touched it, they might be swallowed by the death chi and die. If Li Daochong hadn't controlled the fissure 10 days ago, it would have spread out by now. Anyone who perceived the strong death chi on the other side would be scared and wouldn't dare to enter. However, Li Daochong was incomparably excited, and his body trembled slightly. The thicker the death chi was, the more delicious it was to him. He hadn't hunted for a long time. The corners of Li Daocheng's lips curled up slightly. After adding another layer of spirit chi barrier, he stepped into the space crack. A light flashed in front of his eyes, and he felt a tearing force all over his body. After more than 10 seconds, Li Daocheng appeared on a desolate slope. The sky here was gray and very low. He felt that he could reach it with a jump. There was no sunlight, and the temperature was very low. When he exhaled, there was mist. There was a lot of dust floating in the air. At first glance, there was a layer of frost on the dead wood. The ground was gray and seemed to have no water at all. It was cracked into pieces. This was a dead land. It was roughly the same as Li Daocheng's exploration 10 days ago. Behind the slope was a mine that had been abandoned for many years. Dozens of scrapped mine carts were scattered around in a mess. Some were overturned, some were lying on their sides, and some seemed to have been hit by something and were torn apart. This mine was very large and deep, several kilometers in diameter. The deepest point was 100 meters deep. The entire mine had been almost completely mined. Li Daocheng only sensed a few concentrated pulses of magic metal. Li Daocheng focused all his attention on finding dark ghosts, but after searching for several minutes, he found no dark ghosts nearby. This was completely different from what Li Daocheng had sensed 10 days ago. 10 days ago, Li Daocheng had clearly sensed that dark ghosts were wandering around. Although they weren't very high level, there were many of them. 10 days later, when Li Daocheng stepped into this place, he saw nothing but desolation. There wasn't even a ghost to be seen. Li Daocheng found this very strange. Low-level dark ghosts would only move when they smelled living souls. Otherwise, they would just wander around aimlessly. And they wouldn't move on a large scale. Li Daocheng had come to enjoy a sumptuous feast, but he hadn't expected to be stood up by his food. He was instantly disappointed. Without dark ghosts, Li Daocheng focused his attention on the pulses of magic metal. These pulses weren't very strong, but they were very clear. From what Li Daocheng had read in books, magic metal would slowly lose its magic metal when immersed in death chi. It would gradually become death metal and ultimately become scrap metal. This region was devoid of spiritual chi and had been thoroughly soaked in death chi. It was a land of death. Li Daocheng sent his telekinesis into the ground. Even several hundred meters down, the death chi was still heavy. This place had been occupied by dark ghosts for at least 100 years, perhaps even longer. After all this time, there were still magic metal pulses? Li Daocheng was puzzled. His heart stirred. Could it be some special magic metal? Li Daocheng tapped his foot and flew in the direction of the magic metal pulses. After crossing 2 kilometers of the mine, he stopped above a tunnel. The tunnel was very deep. It was impossible to see the area below with the naked eye. It was completely dark. Besides the magic metal pulses, there was also an extremely dense death chi. Li Daocheng licked his lips. With a surge of telekinesis, the Tsang ink saber appeared in his hand. He then slowly descended into the tunnel. In the dusky environment, after descending for 20 or 30 meters, everything was pitch black. Li Daocheng's eyes flashed with blue lightning. Activating the Eye of Lightning Punishment, the pitch-black environment immediately became clear. After descending another 60 or 70 meters, he reached the bottom. This place was full of bumps and hollows. One could imagine the bustling scene when this place had been mined. Li Daocheng floated at a low altitude. That magic gold fluctuation became more and more intense as it probed. Finally, it stopped above an inconspicuous blue stone. The magic metal pulses were coming from the stone. Li Daocheng descended and was just about to pick up the bucket-sized blue stone for a closer look. However, before he could grab it, a chilly wind blew behind him. The entire tunnel seemed to have fallen into an ice cave, and the already low temperature plummeted again. It was as if he had entered a land of ice. Li Daocheng felt a chill run down his spine. Giving up on picking up the stone, he turned around and slashed out with the Tsang ink saber. Whoosh! Li Daochong dispelled the grayish-white fog. There was an irregular hole in the wall behind him. Cold qi and death qi were pouring out from within. Within the dark hole, a pair of fiery eyes stared at Li Daochong. Chapter 384. Li Daochong had goosebumps, not because of fear, but because of an instinctive reaction to an unexpected event. It was as if you were concentrating on something, and suddenly someone came up from behind and hit you or yelled at you. That was all. What scared people in horror movies was never the demons or ghosts, but the unknown things that brought about a high degree of pressure and tension. If it really came out, there was nothing to be afraid of for many people. When Li Daochong turned to look at the dark cave, his emotions had already calmed down, and the flickering sparks in his eyes gradually became more intense. It was a normal reaction when one was hungry and saw a big meal. His eyes lit up. I want to eat. The thing in the dark cave had deliberately concealed its death aura, and the surrounding environment was rich with death aura. Li Daochong was careless and did not notice it immediately. When it revealed itself, Li Daochong instantly sensed that it was a withered life ghost that had completed its evolution. A few months ago, when Li Daochong was helping Lu Xingyuan on planet Crimson Sun, he had killed a withered life ghost. The difference was that the withered life ghost was sleeping and had not fully evolved. However, the withered life ghost's dead soul power was extremely strong, far stronger than the dead soul power it should have. That was because the withered life ghost had been devoured by a powerful witch ghost and became a witch ghost clone. However, that withered life ghost's dead soul power was only strong, and it was still sleeping, so Li Daochong used a level 10 talisman to kill it. The one in front of him was completely different. It was a withered life ghost that had successfully evolved. Before it evolved, it was a withered life ghost which belonged to the Wraith level. After it evolved, it became a soul catcher level. It became a king of Kukui. Among the soul catcher ghosts, it was a relatively powerful wraith, and had evolved into a wraith body. In the dark cave, 2 balls of fire slowly floated out. Creature that looked like a mummy walked out. It looked like a skeleton wrapped in black wrinkled and rough dry skin. His limbs were much longer than a normal person's, and he had no nose, ears, or eyes. There were only 2 holes where dark red flames burned. His appearance was no different from the description in the book. He was one of the stronger soul catcher ghosts, the king of Kukui. Before this, the strongest ghosts Li Daochong had faced were the 3 top-level evil ghosts in the nameless cave on planet Crimson Sunday Ghost King, Red Shadow Specter, and Vengeful Bone. The Red Shadow Wraith and Vengeful Bone were already the strongest of the Wraith level. Although the Ghost King was still a Wraith, he was actually a low-level soul catcher. It was equivalent to a Jin Dan middle-stage cultivator. On planet Crimson Sun, Li Daochong was not strong enough to deal with an existence like the Ghost King, at least in a one-on-one fight. At the time, Li Daochong had only just reached Foundation establishment and was very inexperienced. Now, if he met the Ghost King again, Li Daochong could destroy him with a flip of his hand. Putting everything else aside, he could use the Heavenly Thunder art and send down a bolt of Spirit Sun lightning to obliterate the Ghost King. But the King of Kukui was even more formidable than the Ghost King. The latter was only a half-underworld body, while the former had already formed a complete underworld body. The 2 of them were no longer on the same level. Of course, the current Li Daochong was also on a completely different level. The intelligence of a soul catcher ghost was very close to that of a human. They had their own consciousness, and their innate sense of evolution and hunger were the most primitive driving forces for them to activate their intelligence. This was also the core of their actions. If an underworld ghost did not eat for a long time, they would die. To be more precise, they would disappear and turn to dust. Thus, they ate human souls to survive. After the lowest level of underworld ghost was formed, they would only be able to survive for 2 or 3 years if they did not eat. The higher the level of underworld ghost, the longer they would be able to survive. A baleful ghost-level underworld ghost could survive without eating human souls for 30 years, but a soul-catcher ghost could last even longer, almost 60 years. Of course, no matter what level of underworld ghost it was, if they did not eat for a long time, they would become weak. If a ghost king was unable to replenish its energy for 20 years, even a chi condensation cultivator would be able to easily kill it. But underworld ghosts could not only eat human souls, but also dead souls. But unless it was absolutely necessary, underworld ghosts would not eat each other. There were 3 reasons for this. The first was that dead souls were not as tasty as souls. It was like the difference between the most disgusting food and the most delicious food. The disgusting food was so disgusting that one would vomit if they ate it. The second reason was that underworld ghosts eating each other would decrease their population. Underworld ghosts had to meet certain conditions to reproduce. If they met these conditions, they could reproduce as quickly as insects. If they failed to meet these conditions, they would not be able to produce a single offspring even after hundreds or thousands of years. The rate at which underworld ghosts formed was even lower than that of spirit. The number of underworld ghosts seemed endless, but tens of thousands of years ago, they had been very few in number, even in danger of extinction. After the Hades connected with the spirit world, they had undoubtedly opened Pandora's box. Devouring souls and vitality was the source of underworld ghosts' reproduction. The final reason was relatively simple. Devouring each other was very slow. So you ate all the underworld ghosts here, Li Daochong said in understanding as he watched the king of Kukui walk out of the cave. What a fragrant smell! How long has it been? How long has it been since I smelled a living soul? I can't even remember, the king of Kukui said in a hoarse voice, its head drooping. The king of Kukui in front of him had clearly evolved by devouring other underworld ghosts. This wasteland had existed for over 100 years, and all living things had been devoured by underworld ghosts long ago. Apart from dead souls and underworld ghosts, there were no other living things. It was just like the flying ghost shuttle that Li Daochong had been to before. Li Daochong could basically confirm that he was on a dead planet occupied by underworld ghosts. There was no life on a dead planet. After all the vitality was devoured by underworld ghosts, there were only 2 paths for them to live on. One was to leave this dead planet and find another one with life. However, if they wanted to leave the planet and fly into outer space, they had to at least form a complete underworld body. Without reaching the level of a soul catcher, they could forget about it. Their underworld bodies would quickly be annihilated by various magnetic fields in outer space. Compared to human cultivators, underworld ghosts had a much higher requirement to leave the planet. Ordinary soul catchers weren't enough. They had to become high-level soul catchers. The withered ghost in front of him just happened to meet the requirements to leave the planet and fly into outer space. However, underworld ghosts of this level usually wouldn't take the risk to leave. If they could take another step and become a lesser witch ghost, it would be much safer to leave. Little Witch Ghost was the highest level of soul-devouring ghost, and it was equivalent to a soul-devouring ghost king. If it advanced further, it would become an underworld ghost noble. A witch ghost. The king of Kukui stared fixedly at Li Daochong with his fiery eyes. Black saliva dripped from the corners of his withered mouth. The soul emanating from this prey that had suddenly appeared was abnormally powerful and fragrant. If he could devour it, the time it would take to become a lesser witch ghost would be greatly reduced. At that time, he would be able to leave this damned place with no food. Whoosh! The king of Kukui disappeared from where he stood. Li Daochong's pupils constricted. He instantly turned around and slashed with the Tsang ink. The 4th layer of the 9-split saber technique, heaven collapsing slash. Clang! Crack! The Tsang ink saber collided with the king of Kukui's arm. First, there was the sound of metal clashing. Li Daochong's arm went slightly numb. Immediately after, there was the sound of bones cracking. The king of Kukui's eyes blazed. He stared at Li Daochong in shock. This human was stronger than he had imagined. He had actually injured himself. A deep scar appeared on the withered bones wrapped in black skin. The grayish-brown bones inside cracked slightly. Chapter 385. More than 10 bone spikes exploded and shot out at an extremely fast speed. Li Daochong was almost hit. There was such a move. Li Daochong hurriedly retreated, but 2 of the bone spurs still scraped the skin in front of his chest. He immediately felt a burning sensation in his chest. In an instant, Li Daochong and the king of Kukui opened up a distance of dozens of meters. As soon as they landed, more than 10 grayish-brown rays of light rushed over. Those bone spurs shot over like sharp arrows. Li Daochong's pupils suddenly shrank. Electric light in his eyes? Plastic bag spring? Elbows and elbows? Elbows? Bedridden elbows? Desolated elbows? 9 split saber techniques 5th stage, star slashing slash. Whoosh. Song ink slashed out, an array of starlight flashed out. Bang bang bang, more than 10 bone spurs were cut off, and the sound of hitting hardwood could be heard. Whoosh. However, 1 bone spur was still missed. Li Daochong instinctively dodged to the side, and the side of his shoulder was grazed. That patch of skin was immediately charred black. Li Daochong grimaced in pain. This ghost was truly powerful. The corrosion rate of the dead bones extended from the underworld body was abnormally high. Li Daochong had almost reached the perfect spiritual body, but he was still unable to completely resist the strong death qi. Bah! Li Daochong spat out a mouthful of saliva. He was somewhat annoyed that he was actually being suppressed by that ghost. The king of Kukui's 2 balls of ghostly fire flickered a few times in his eye socket. His terrifying face revealed a bit of surprise. The bone spurs he had shot out had actually only grazed the skin of his prey. Despite his surprise, the king of Kukui did not stop. A pair of skinny and bony legs contracted and extended like springs, and the skeleton body shot out like an arrow. However, just as he moved, a tsang ink-colored blade slashed down from above. The king of Kukui raised his head and looked. The prey in his eyes was looking at him with a grin. The blade in his hand extended into a giant blade shadow that was more than 10 meters long. 9 split saber techniques 6th stage, sun-splitting slash. The gigantic saber light slashed down like an avalanche. The king of Kukui raised his skeletal hands to block the attack. Boom! As the saber fell, the king of Kukui was smashed into the ground, creating a huge crater. Surprisingly, the king of Kukui was able to take the blow head-on, and his arms were not cut off. Li Daochong was slightly taken aback. What a powerful fellow! It was still fine even after that. The laceration effect was also suppressed by its death aura. The king of Kukui jumped out of the pit without any hesitation. As soon as he landed, his back exploded with 2 bangs. Most of the lacerate effect had been suppressed, but there were still 2 effects. 2 small holes appeared on the king of Kukui's back, which was charred white as if it had been burned by flames. Death aura had a strong corrosive effect on humans. The king of Kukui's death aura would turn an ordinary person into a skeleton if they came into contact with it. On the other hand, spirit qi also had a strong corrosive effect on dark ghosts. With Li Daochong's current strength, a little bit of spirit qi could completely dissipate a low-level dark ghost. Both the king of Kukui and Li Daochong were burned by the other's death aura and spirit qi. Human, you're very strong. The king of Kukui's death aura continuously poured into the wounds on his back, quickly forcing the spirit qi out of his body. It's not too late to praise me after you're dead, Li Daochong said arrogantly, his blood boiling and battle intent surging. Taking advantage of the gap, Li Daochong also used his spirit qi to heal his wounds. Are you humans all so arrogant? I remember that when I was first born here, there were quite a few humans here, existences as strong as you or even stronger. They were just as confident when facing the king of Kukui, But in the end, the king of Kukui tore apart their souls and devoured them bit by bit, becoming a part of the king of Kukui. The king of Kukui's voice was like sandpaper grinding against a wall. Is that so? Then what are you still talking about? Come on. Li Daochong provoked. As he spoke, the lightning in his eyes became even denser. The heavenly lightning art was on the verge of being activated. Li Daochong did not want to fight for a long time. This damned place was very strange, and he could not stay for long. He had encountered the king of Kukui as soon as he arrived. He did not know what kind of damned things were hidden in the depths of this dead planet. If another king of Kukui appeared, he really would not be able to deal with it. One was already so difficult to deal with. If there was a witch ghost, it would be even more troublesome. First, he would devour this king of Kukui in front of him. The king of Kukui had only said that to heal his wounds. In just a few words, he had already healed. When he was provoked by Li Daochong, he immediately turned into a black ray of light and shot over. Dang dang dang, in a single exchange, one man and one ghost exchanged dozens of blows. Intense collisions erupted in the tunnel. Blade lights flashed everywhere and bone spikes flew everywhere. The walls of the tunnel exploded from time to time, as if they had been hit by missiles. Some parts even cracked and collapsed. The aftermath of the battle between the two changed the surrounding terrain slightly. The king of Kukui seemed to have sensed that Li Daochong had some kind of trump card. He kept attacking, and even if he was hit by the Tsang ink in Li Daochong's hand, he did not care. If you cut me, I'll stab you back. Li Daochong was not to be outdone. Since this ghost beast did not give him time to use the heavenly lightning art, then he would not use it. If you want to fight in close combat, then I'll accompany you. Let's see who can be stubborn to the end. However, Li Daochong was not completely stubborn. Although the king of Kukui's nether body was not complete, as long as it was formed, it was a complete nether body. Withered bones and withered skin just did not look good. Li Daochong's spirit body was not complete. If he fought purely head-on, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. Thus, Li Daochong activated the spirit sun lightning in his body. Apart from the 9 split saber art, every saber strike was mixed with spirit sun lightning. Every saber strike had the effect of lightning. Spirit sun lightning had an additional effect on nether ghosts. It was one of the nether ghosts' nemeses. In this way, it was clear that Li Daochong had the advantage. The king of Kukui's strength lay in his withered bone nether body, but he was not skilled in nether arts or ghostly arts, so he did not have any particularly powerful killing moves. To put it bluntly, the king of Kukui was the soldier of the soul-catcher ghosts, the vanguard of the charge. On the front lines, the most common combination of nether ghosts on the ground charge was the king of Kukui riding on the Balrog crocodile, sweeping through the army like a tank. If the humans did not have a Jin Dan cultivator who could fight in close combat, trying to contend against him was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. After several hundred exchanges, more than half of the king of Kukui's black body had turned charred white, becoming extremely brittle. Li Daochong's body was not much better. His chest, back, arms, and legs were all charred black, and there was a black scar several inches long on his cheek. The light on Tsang Ink's saber gradually dimmed. Squelch! The king of Kukui ignored Li Daochong's saber and slashed at his waist, his black claws digging deep into Li Daochong's shoulder. The king of Kukui had been trying to lure him in for a long time, and now that he had succeeded, the ghostly flames in his eyes began to burn brighter. How could the king of Kukui let go of such a good opportunity? He exerted force and his claws almost completely sank into Li Daochong's shoulder. Kiki, human, you're very strong, but unfortunately you're still no match for me. You should feel honored to be eaten by me. You will become my final meal before I advance, Kiki. The king of Kukui laughed. As he laughed, the death energy in his body poured into his claws, using his shoulder as an opening to devour Li Daochong. But at this moment, Li Daochong showed no sign of panic. Instead, his lips curled into a faint smile as he looked at the king of Kukui. Is that so? It seems that your soul intelligence is still not developed enough. You didn't hit me so many times before, so why did you hit me this time? Li Daochong asked. The king of Kukui was about to speak when the claws that had grabbed Li Daochong's shoulder suddenly felt a burning sensation. Spiritual yang lightning followed the claws and entered the king of Kukui's arm. Chi! The king of Kukui was shocked. He desperately tried to retract his claws, but he couldn't move. After a long battle, Li Daochong realized that if this continued, he and this ghost beast would both be injured. At that time, any little ghost would be able to kill him. Instead of being in a stalemate, it was better to do something exciting. Since the king of Kukui didn't give him time to use the heavenly thunder spell, he had to create time himself. Li Daochong's eyes emitted a dazzling light of lightning. The king of Kukui felt the danger of death. His other claws clawed at Li Daochong's head. Clang! Li Daochong raised Song Ink to block. Heavenly thunder spell, Eye of Thunder punishment. 2 bolts of lightning shot out from Li Daochong's eyes. Roar! The king of Kukui let out a deafening roar, but his voice was filled with fear. Boom! The 2 bolts of lightning struck the king of Kukui's body. Ping! That withered body of bones exploded into pieces, turning into countless shattered bones that scattered all over the ground. Only a broken arm hung on Li Daochong's shoulder. Its claws were still stuck on Li Daochong's shoulder. Li Daochong immediately took out a level 8 fire talisman and blasted it at the broken bones scattered on the ground. Flames ignited, instantly burning the black and white bones crisscrossing on the ground to ashes. Beep! Killed 1 king of Kukui. Soul power gained. Host leveled up to level 19. A notification came from the depths of Li Daochong's sea of consciousness. As soon as the voice fell, there was a boom. The spirit energy in Li Daochong's body erupted like a sudden spring. From the peak of the late stage of foundation establishment to the peak stage of foundation establishment, the foundation establishment placenta kept shrinking. Its essence flowed into the protruding pigeon egg in the center of the placenta. That was the embryonic form of the Jin Dan. The originally pale gold foundation establishment placenta turned golden yellow. The pigeon egg kept growing, quickly reaching the size of half an egg. In a few minutes, it grew to the size of a fist. When it reached the size of a fist, the growth slowed down, but it was still growing. The golden color became more and more dazzling, and the embryonic form of the Jin Dan became more and more concrete. It was no longer oval in shape, but was transforming into a perfect circle. The burns on the surface of Li Daochong's body that had just suffered from the deathly aura were melting at a speed visible to the naked eye. In a short while, it was as good as new. The skeletal claw that was inserted into Li Daochong's shoulder was squeezed out and fell to the ground. Li Daochong's cultivation was still increasing, and seemed to be showing signs of breaking through the peak of foundation establishment. But in the end, it stopped when the half Jin Dan was formed. The pale blue lightning flashing in Li Daochong's eyes also changed at this time. The blue continued to deepen, and there was even a trace of gold. The excess spirit energy flowed into the spirit sun lightning, and the lightning ball continued to condense into an egg-sized blue-gold lightning ball that merged into the shrunken placenta again. This level-up was a little different from Li Daochong's previous level-up. Previously, he leveled up by 1 level. But this time, Li Daochong felt that it was more than 1 level, but not 2. To be precise, it was 1.5 levels. It seemed to be the Jin Dan stage, but it wasn't. It wasn't the peak of foundation establishment either. It should be above the peak of foundation establishment and below the early Jin Dan stage. Half-step Jin Dan. Li Daochong's body was also changing. The few remaining impurities were completely cleaned after exhaling a mouthful of turbid air. His spirit body true body was finally complete. Li Daochong stretched out his hands and looked at them, revealing a faint smile. I've finally completed my spirit body true body. Now I should be considered a true cultivator. After saying that, Li Daochong disappeared on the spot with a whoosh, and appeared in front of the bluestone that was emitting magical gold waves. Li Daochong stretched out his hand, and the bluestone was sucked into his hand from the ground. A bluestone the size of a bucket usually weighed more than 100 kilograms, and a Qi refinement cultivator could easily lift it. But this bluestone actually sank when it landed in the hands of Li Daochong, who was already half-step Jin Dan. Li Daochong almost dropped it because he didn't use any strength. Hey! Li Daochong's eyes were full of surprise. So heavy? It weighed at least a few thousand kilograms. Chapter 386. Li Daochong didn't know much about magic gold. He couldn't see anything special about this ordinary-looking stone except for its weight. Li Daochong studied the stone for a while before putting it into his storage ring. It was best not to mess around with things he didn't know about. If he damaged the stone and turned it into a piece of trash, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. He would ask old Ghost Zhang when he got back. That old man would definitely know what it was. After putting away the stone, Li Daochong had no intention of staying here any longer. He flew out of the tunnel and prepared to return home. But just as Li Daochong was about to fly out of the tunnel, he sensed with his psychic energy the auras of several hundred nether ghosts converging on him. What was going on? Li Daochong's expression froze. The tsang ink under his feet dove down and landed on a protruding rock at the edge of the tunnel. For some reason, a large group of nether ghosts was rushing toward Li Daochong's location. As expected, this damned place was a Death Star occupied by nether ghosts. Had he been discovered? Li Daochong frowned. In his battle with the king of Kukui just now, he hadn't recklessly released his spiritual energy. The king of Kukui's thick death energy had somewhat concealed Li Daochong's spiritual energy. Even if it had leaked out, it wouldn't have drifted very far, and Li Daochong had also used his psychic energy to wrap it up. With these factors combined, Li Daochong was sure that his aura couldn't have drifted very far. Curious, Li Daochong focused his psychic energy and spread it out. A while later, Li Daochong paled. These nether ghosts weren't coming for him, but for the soul energy seeping out of the spatial rift. Although Li Daochong had set up several safety barriers on the other side, they weren't completely foolproof. The king of Kukui that Li Daochong had just killed could have broken through if it had risked serious injury. Most of these nether ghosts weren't of high levels, but there were so many of them. Low-level dark ghosts had no brains at all. They were basically hungry ghosts. As long as they smelled food, they would go crazy. What was a spatial crack? They wouldn't even consider it. Even if they couldn't break through it, they would still charge forward. Like a moth darting into a flame, he would throw himself forward even if he had to die. With so many nether ghosts, each attack would weaken Li Daochong's barrier a little. Damn it, I was too careless. I forgot to add a spiritual energy seal on this side when I came over, causing the aura on the other side to leak out from the spatial rift without any concealment, Li Daochong said to himself in annoyance. They couldn't let these bastards rush through the rift, or else Blue Bay Star would be finished. Without the slightest hesitation, Li Daochong took to the air and flew toward the spatial crack. No matter what, he had to stop these dark ghosts. The nether ghosts surged in from all directions, forming a black mass. Li Daochong gripped the tsang ink, his eyes flashing with lightning. He stood in front of the spatial crack, facing so many nether ghosts like a door god. Most of these nether ghosts had yet to develop intelligence. They only had one thought in mind: eat. As soon as they smelled a soul, they would attack in a frenzy. They didn't care if the prey was strong or if they could eat it. Countless specters lunged at Li Daochong like they had gone mad. In a flash, saber light wreaked havoc on the slope, unleashing bolt after bolt of lightning. One man against a horde of ghosts. Such a scene was rarely seen on the front lines. With so many nether ghosts, even if they weren't of high levels, Their sea of ghosts was enough to make a Jin Dan cultivator tremble in fear. But Li Daochong wasn't the least bit afraid. On the contrary, he was extremely excited. With each slash of his saber, 10 some nether ghosts would be annihilated. The hot-blooded upgrader beeped again and again. The soul power he obtained was constantly converted into spirit chi, but the level of these nether ghosts was a bit low. They were all below the blue ghost level. Even though there were a lot of them, after Li Daochong absorbed them, the amount of spirit chi increased was extremely limited. Li Daochong didn't even increase his spirit chi after killing some of them. Just as Li Daochong was fighting a horde of ghosts alone. In the sky above Blue Bay Star, a giant space shuttle slowly entered the atmosphere, ignoring the warnings of Blue Bay Star's local army. It landed directly at the largest space shuttle port in Tianyuan City, the most central location of Tianyuan Port. The warnings of Blue Bay Star's local army only lasted for a few minutes before they stopped, because a powerful aura enveloped Tianyuan City. The commander of Blue Bay Star's local army, LV Xing, was so scared that he wet his pants. Commander LV, this aura. The deputy standing next to LV Xing was speechless. Open the test and tell me what's his cultivation level? LV Xing was sweating profusely, as if he was facing a great enemy. The other party ignored the warning and came aggressively. They definitely didn't come to Blue Bay Star for sightseeing. That space shuttle wasn't a transport shuttle either. It was a B-grade space shuttle. The highest grade space shuttle on Blue Bay Star was an E-grade space shuttle belonging to the local army. Compared to the one in front of them, it was just a sparrow. You're moving so slowly. You still haven't tested it? LV Xing was practically roaring. It's tested. Reporting to Commander, the test result is Jin Dan Peak. The deputy's face was pale. Jin Dan Peak. LV Xing's brain short-circuited. After a few seconds, he suddenly regained his senses and shouted, "Quickly send reinforcements to Kangwu Star's military. Commander, we can't send out any spirit wave signals. All the equipment is paralyzed." What? LV Xing was shocked. At this time, the B-grade space shuttle's cabin door opened, and several luxurious space shuttles flew out. They flew towards a certain area of Tianyuan City. As for the local army, they didn't even put them in their eyes. LV Xing's legs were trembling, because when the cabin door opened, a string of numbers appeared on the spirit vision screen in front of him. 1 Jin Dan Peak Cultivator, 3 Jin Dan Middle Stage Cultivators, 3 Jin Dan Early Stage Cultivators, and several Foundation Establishment Cultivators. Are they here to destroy Blue Bay Star? LV Xing sat down on the chair behind him, completely at a loss. Commander, the B-grade space shuttle sent a message. Quickly connect it. LV Xing hurriedly said. Commander LV, do you still remember me? A smiling face immediately appeared on the spirit vision screen. LV Xing was stunned for a moment, but quickly recognized the face. More than 10 years ago, when he was still a basic officer, he had some interactions with this person. At that time, in order to cultivate, LV Xing would often go to the underground city to buy some special spirit liquid. This person was the contact person who sold the spirit liquid to him at that time in the Blood Knife Society. More than 10 years later, LV Xing had already become the commander of the local army, and his cultivation was at Foundation Establishment Middle Stage. And this contact person became one of the core members of the Blood Knife Society, and his cultivation level was at the peak of Foundation Establishment Cultivator. Fang Jie, what is the meaning of your Blood Knife Society? How dare you ignore the local army's defense warning? Don't you know that armed shuttles have to be registered when entering a cultivation planet? Although LV Xing was scared to death, he still questioned on the surface. He was the commander of the Blue Bay Star Defense Force, and behind him was the military. No matter how scared he was, he couldn't show it. Commander LV, don't be nervous. Aren't I here to greet you? I didn't report it because I have an urgent matter to deal with. Our president has personally come to Blue Bay Star to deal with it. I hope Commander LV can make things easier for us. Fang Jie said. Your commander, the Blood Ape King, has come to Blue Bay Star? LV Xing stuttered again. Yes. I don't know who killed 4 important members of our society 10 days ago. Commander LV, do you think we should deal with this kind of person? Fang Jie said casually. Yes, of course. Since such a thing has happened to your society, and even His Excellency the Blood Ape King has come in person, we naturally have to catch the culprit. But you have to be careful. LV Xing didn't dare to stop the Blood Ape King. The last sentence was purely said out of courage. Commander LV, Blue Bay Star is a small place. Even if the president is really killed, how do you think the Federation will deal with it? Fang Jie asked with a smile. LV Xing was speechless. Although the Blood Knife Society wasn't a proper cultivation company and was an organization that wandered on the edge of society, its situation was a little special. It was founded by the descendants of the shifter race and had made contributions to the Federation. Moreover, it would still be useful now and in the future. Chapter 387. The news that the Blood Knife Society's Commander-in-Chief battleship had arrived at the Blue Bay Star spread like wildfire. The first to fall into chaos was the underground city. Every underground organization was in danger. They didn't know why the Blood Knife Society had suddenly mobilized all of its members to the Blue Bay Star. No matter where it was, the underground organizations couldn't avoid fighting both openly and covertly. It was impossible for every organization to have no grudges against each other. The organizations that had recently clashed with the Blue Bay Star's Blood Knife Society had all gone into hiding. Almost half of the underground city was empty. Only a few organizations with deep backgrounds hadn't moved. The shadow-secluded mill was naturally one of them. Old Devil Zhang sat in his crafting room with a worried expression on his old face. He knew that the Blood Ape King had personally come for Li Daochong. This kid is in big trouble this time. Old Devil Zhang shook his head helplessly. He then contacted Xing Jiao on the Red Sun planet. Old Devil, what did you say? The Blood Ape King is on the Blue Bay Star? How can that be? The Blood Knife Society has been focusing their attention on the Red Sun planet recently. Why would they go to the Blue Bay Star? Xing Jiao's voice came from the other side of the wristwatch. You're asking me? How would I know? Li Daochong killed 4 members of the Blood Knife Society a few days ago. From what I know, they weren't the core members of the Blood Knife Society. Although those 4 people had some skills, they shouldn't have alerted the Blood Ape King. Old Devil Zhang was also puzzled. That's strange. Could it be that the Blood Knife Society has some secret mission on the Blue Bay Star? Xing Jiao couldn't understand. Little girl, this is no small matter. Li Daochong is your treasure. If he is killed by the Blood Ape King, I'm afraid your dream of becoming one of the higher-ups of the Shadow Serene Square will fall through. Hurry up and inform the square owner. Old Devil Zhang reminded her. Xing Jiao was silent for a while before she said, It's useless to inform the owner. She doesn't know Li Daochong. Even if I tell her that the Blood Knife Society has appeared on Blue Bay Star, she won't take it seriously. Besides, the owner isn't even in 4-ring star zone right now. Even if she rushes over, she won't be able to make it in time. It's better to inform Wei Beitong. Old Ghost Zhang's eyes lit up. Girl, you're really smart. That's right, that old man Wei Beitong is very interested in Li Daochong. He's always wanted to meet him, but he never did. Before old Ghost Zhang finished his words, Xing Jiao had already closed the 1,000-mile transmission. Other than the Blood Ape King, the Blood Knife Society had 3 other Blood Knife Elders under him: the Gorfiend Spider, the Rhinoceros Monster, and the 9-tailed Fox. The 3 elders were all mid-stage Jin Dan. The Gorfiend Spider's human form was an old woman who had lived for more than 200 years. People called her the Gore-fiend Granny. The rhinoceros monster had the appearance of a middle-aged man. He had 2 rhinoceros horns of different lengths on his back. His armor was as hard as diamond, and he was extremely strong. People called him the Iron Rhinoceros. The 9-tailed fox was a charming woman who looked like a fairy. She was the most mysterious member of the Blood Knife Society. She had only joined the Blood Knife Society more than 30 years ago. Not long after she joined, she rose through the ranks and quickly became a core member. In less than 15 years, she had become an elder. The Blood Ape King valued her greatly. However, there were also people who said that the Blood Ape King was bewitched by her beauty and fell for the 9-tailed fox's charm. That was why he valued the 9-tailed fox so much. The 9-tailed fox was originally a noble among the shifters. When the shifters were still prosperous, the 9-tailed fox was usually one of the shifters' emperor's concubines. However, the 9-tailed fox lineage disappeared after the Hades invasion. The survivors of the shifters once thought that this lineage, which had once written a glorious history among the shifters, had gone extinct. It was not until this person from the Blood Knife Society appeared that they knew that there were still some survivors of the 9-tailed fox lineage. However, they chose to assimilate with the human race. This was also a way to avoid extinction. The 9-tailed fox was the latest to join the society, but she was the strongest of the 3 elders. Her bone age was no more than 60 years old. The shifters had a very long lifespan. 60 years old was just enough to reach adulthood, which was similar to the human race's 20 years old. The shifters' cultivation was relatively slow. However, the 9-tailed fox had reached the peak of the mid-stage Jean Dan in less than 60 years old. She was definitely considered a genius among the shifters. The 9-tailed fox would only grow 9 tails when she reached the soul formation stage. The mid-stage Jean Dan only had 5 tails. No one knew this woman's name. The elders called her Hu Ling and the subordinates called her the 3rd elder. The Blood Ape King came ferociously. On the way, he had already thoroughly investigated the Blue Bay Star. When they arrived at the Blue Bay Star, the Blood Ape King took Hu Ling and the Iron Rhinoceros and went straight to Princess Catherine. The shifters not only had spiritual energy, but also shifters' aura. It was very easy for the shifters to sense each other. Princess Catherine's body was also restrained by the Blood Ape King. Even if she was thousands of miles away, he could still sense her exact location. Unless she left the planet, the Blood Ape King would be able to lock onto Princess Catherine no matter where she was. Granny Blood Demon took a group of people to the Heavenly Palace Club, which was the place where the 4 Blood Knife Society members were killed. They were there to investigate the real cause of their death. There was also a group of Blood Knife Society members who went to the 4 major families of the Blue Bay Star in batches. The 5 people who went to the Blue Bay Star to carry out the mission could only be considered mid-level in the Blood Knife Society. However, they were already considered experts on the Blue Bay Star. There were very few people in the entire Blue Bay Star who could kill 4 of them and capture one of them alive at the same time. Other than the 4 major families, the Blood Knife Society really couldn't find a 5th factor in the information they had. Before the investigation results were out, the 4 major families were the most suspicious because they were the only ones who had the strength to do so. The people who went to the 4 major families were the 3 Hall Masters of the Law Enforcement Hall under the 3 Elders of the Blood Knife Society. Merman Clan's Shamo, early Jean Dan. Golden Lion Clan's Cha Deli, early Jean Dan. Giant Crocodile Clan's Quinn, early Jean Dan. Shamo went to the House of Oku, Cha Deli went to the Gu family, and Quinn went to the Li family. In addition, several Blood Knife Society branch presidents went to the Hong family. As for the newly established Zhao family, according to the analysis of the Blood Knife Society's think tank, they didn't have the strength to do so, so they didn't send anyone. Although the Li family's information in the past year showed that they were declining and didn't seem to have the strength to do so, in the end, they were an old family. Moreover, not long ago they were the head of the 4 major families. Therefore, they weren't ruled out as suspects. All the plans had been formulated early on when the Blood Knife Battle Shuttle shuttled through the starry sky. When they arrived at the Blue Bay Star, the big shots of the Blood Knife Society immediately took action separately. All the people who carried out the operation were the higher-ups and didn't bring too many subordinates. Almost all the Blood Knife Society members on the Blood Knife Battle Shuttle stayed on the shuttle. They didn't have nothing to do. They only had one mission, which was to deter the local army of the Blue Bay Star. If this group of reserves had any strange movements, they would immediately launch a thunderous attack on them. Half an hour after the Blood Knife Battle Shuttle landed on the Blue Bay Star, the Blood Knife Society took control of the other 3 major families, except the Li family. Giant Crocodile Quinn couldn't be taken down because Li Tianyang was in charge of the Li family. The 2 fought and the latter was almost captured. Granny Blood Demon only brought 2 subordinates with her. When she came to the Heavenly Palace Club, she set up a Blood Demon spiderweb and caught all the important members of the Flying Shuttle Society. Lu Feng, Blue Phoenix, and Torch Dragon were among them. Only Sky Phoenix wasn't here and wasn't caught. Granny Blood Demon glanced at the dozens of members of the Flying Shuttle Society in front of her with some doubts on her old face. Chapter 388. The Blood Ape King stood outside the old house in the slums and stared at the door that looked like it could fall down at any moment. Behind him, Xiaomo and Hu Ling both revealed looks of surprise. There was something strange about this unassuming old house, and they were certain that Concubine Say was inside. Stand further away. There is a mechanism inside, the Blood Ape King suddenly said. With the exception of Xiaomo and Hu Ling the others who had followed them all retreated. The Blood Ape King threw a palm at the door. With a bang, the door of the house collapsed. The Blood Ape King was surprised. The door collapsed so easily without any mechanism being triggered. When the Blood Ape King flew over, he could have landed directly in the courtyard. However, in the air, he could clearly see that the old house was wrapped in an invisible barrier. There was also a lot of strong spirit energy fluctuations inside. Even though the Blood Ape King was at the peak of Jean Dan's cultivation, he did not dare to barge in recklessly because he sensed danger. Am I overthinking things? The Blood Ape King stood outside the door and waited for a while. There was still no movement. Go in, the Blood Ape King said slowly. However, he did not move. He just stood there. When the subordinates heard the order, they were eager to do something. 2 of them immediately rushed into the house. The 2 of them stepped into the house. Nothing happened. Am I overthinking things? The Blood Ape King's eyes flickered. Only then did he step in. Behind him, Xiaomo and Hu Ling also had strange expressions. They followed the Blood Ape King into the house. Just as the Blood Ape King was about to step in, swoosh, 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 inside the house, light flashed everywhere. Several flaming lights shot out. Bang, bang, bang. The first 2 people to enter the house did not have time to react. They were hit by several talismans from different directions. The 2 of them did not even have time to scream before they were swallowed by the flames of the talismans. The few people who followed behind were also affected. Fortunately, they did not come into direct contact with the flames and were only sent flying. The walls on both sides of the old house's door collapsed. The Blood Ape King, Xiaomo, and Hu Ling used their auras to block the shockwaves from the explosion of the talismans. If it were not for the 3 of them, this area would have been razed to the ground. This was an abandoned slum. No one lived in the surrounding houses. There is a mechanism, one of the few people who were sent flying shouted. Whoosh! Just as he finished speaking, another streak of fiery light flew over. Be careful. Hu Ling frowned and reminded him. With a wave of her hand, a ray of light shot out and blocked the flame. Hong! The 2 streaks of light collided and exploded. Immediately after, a ring of spiritual light spread out rapidly, enveloping the Blood Ape King and the rest. It's a spirit array. Sha'emo looked surprised. The Blood Ape King snorted coldly. Child's play. Friend inside, I advise you to come out. Don't try to be mysterious. As he spoke, the Blood Ape King punched the ground. With a boom, the ground exploded, sending sand and pebbles flying. Shockwaves rolled. The spiritual light that enveloped them was broken, and the spiritual formation of the old house was shattered by the Blood Ape King's punch. After breaking the spiritual array, the Blood Ape King's face was still gloomy. Firstly, it was because there was still no movement in the old house after he had spoken. Secondly, the sense of danger had not disappeared. Having learned their lesson, the members of the Blood Knife Society who had been sent flying didn't dare to charge forward again. The Blood Ape King stood with his hands behind his back. He had no intention of going in. He only glanced indifferently at the second elder. Sha'emo's eyelids twitched. He glanced at Hulinger and felt a little annoyed. The Blood Ape King's meaning was clear. He wanted Sha'emo to be the vanguard. If the others weren't strong enough, they would be throwing their lives away if they encountered any traps. Apart from the Blood Ape King, only Sha'emo and Hulinger were left. It was clear that the Blood Ape King favored Hulinger. Sha'emo didn't dare to disobey the Blood Ape King's orders. He reluctantly walked into the house. Sha'emo walked to the center of the courtyard. After confirming that there was nothing wrong, the Blood Ape King and the others followed him in. However, when they all walked into the house, more than 10 threads of spiritual light suddenly lit up around the courtyard. They intertwined into a net and cut toward them. Ha! Sha'emo roared. His aura surged violently, and a broad saber appeared in his hand. Sha'emo slashed with his saber, shattering the spiritual light net. Motherf *Ker, if you don't come out, I'll tear this house down. Sha'emo roared. Ever since they arrived at the house, they hadn't seen a single person. There were traps everywhere. The Blood Knife Society was playing with them like monkeys. Although Sha'emo was unwilling to be the vanguard, he had no choice but to act under the threat of his boss. Now that he had nowhere to vent his anger, he directed it at the old house's owner. He was a mid-stage Jin Dan cultivator. When had he ever been played like this? Sha'emo roared and swung his saber at a house to the side. Shing! The saber light flashed and a several dozen meter-long fissure spread from the old house to the dozen or so houses behind it. Sha'emo then crashed into another house like a cannonball. He was ready to tear this house down. However, just as Sha'emo rushed into the house, a spiritual light suddenly shone from a corner of the house. A wave of icy cold chi wreaked havoc. The surrounding temperature suddenly dropped, and a layer of frost appeared on the ground. Then, a cold light shot out. When the spiritual light flashed, the Blood Ape King and Hulinger still had a fearless expression. One of them was a peak Jin Dan cultivator, while the other was a mid-stage Jin Dan cultivator. What kind of threat could a small place like Blue Bay Star pose? But when that cold light shot out, the two of them felt a strange sense of danger. Perhaps it wasn't enough to cause too much of a threat, but that sense of the unknown made the Blood Ape King and Hulinger unwilling to take the risk. The two of them simultaneously rushed to the side. The other subordinates who followed them also felt the crisis. However, they couldn't avoid it even if they wanted to. The speed of the cold light was far beyond their imagination. If not for the Blood Ape King and Hulinger's strength, they wouldn't have been able to react in time. To be able to follow the Blood Ape King's subordinates, their strength and status in the Blood Knife Society were extraordinary. The two people who had just been annihilated by the Fire Talisman were mid-stage Foundation Establishment cultivators. Of the remaining 5, the strongest was a peak Foundation Establishment cultivator, while the weakest was a mid-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator. Unable to dodge in time, the 5 of them desperately tried to block the cold light. Crack, 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 with a clear sound of freezing, the 5 Foundation Establishment cultivators were instantly frozen. Their resistance was useless. A level 10 ice talisman? Hu Ling stood on the roof and stared at the 5 ice sculptures below. Her beautiful face revealed a look of surprise. Then she frowned. No, it's not even a level 10 talisman. It's a level 9 talisman, but how can it be so powerful? Suddenly, Hu Ling sucked in a breath of cold air. Hiss, an enhanced level 9 talisman. A level 9 talisman wasn't something that just anyone could have. A level 7 talisman could cause harm to early-stage foundation establishment cultivators, while a level 9 talisman could threaten peak foundation establishment cultivators. However, it was only a threat. Logically speaking, a level 9 talisman couldn't instantly kill a peak foundation establishment cultivator. However, this ice talisman had instantly frozen 5 experts of the Blood Knife Society. One of them was even a peak foundation establishment cultivator. Could this ice talisman be an enhanced level 9 talisman? Hu Ling's almond-shaped eyes revealed a trace of doubt. A level 9 talisman could still be bought if one was rich enough. However, an enhanced level 9 talisman wasn't so easy to get. It wasn't a matter of money, but that it couldn't be sold on the market. This was because even a spirit sequencer who could create a level 10 talisman couldn't create an enhanced level 9 talisman. All enhanced talismans had to be created by oneself and didn't have any template. No matter what level a talisman was, it could be drawn by learning standard spirit patterns. The enhanced talisman's spirit patterns weren't standard, but it still followed the spirit pattern law. It was like the difference between copying a gourd and an abstract painting. Spirit sequencers who could create enhanced talismans were all extremely talented people. Not to mention the Federation, they were rare geniuses in the entire spiritual realm. Regardless of their cultivation, they were all popular goods. Those with low cultivation couldn't create high-grade enhanced talismans, but they could cooperate with spirit sequencers with high cultivation to create high-grade enhanced talismans. The owner of this old residence was a genius spirit sequencer? Hu Ling's beautiful pitch-black eyes narrowed slightly. If it was such a person who captured Princess Catherine and killed the other 4 people? Things seemed to be a little strange. If this spirit sequencer had a wide network, even the Blood Knife Society might not dare to offend him. However, how could there be a genius spirit sequencer in a remote village like Blue Bay Star? Hu Ling's perception was very strong. Although the Blood Ape King's cultivation was much higher than Hu Ling's, his perception wasn't as strong or sharp. The Blood Ape King only thought it was a level 10 talisman. When he saw his 5 subordinates instantly frozen into ice sculptures, even the placentas in their bodies turned into ice dregs, he was completely enraged. Previously, he had always felt threatened by this level 10 talisman. Together with the Frost Spirit Array, a level 10 ice talisman was enough to cause harm to Gene Dan cultivators. Even a peak Gene Dan cultivator would be slightly frostbitten by the intense frost if they weren't careful. The Blood Ape King originally thought that with the Blood Knife Society's strength, he could sweep through the entire Blue Bay Star and was unstoppable. He didn't expect to suffer a loss even when he came personally. At this moment, Xiaomo, who had rushed into the house, was tied up by a hemp rope made of an unknown material. No matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't break free. The more he struggled, the tighter the rope became. A dignified Gene Dan cultivator was actually helpless. Li Daochong hadn't stopped setting up defensive measures ever since he came to the old mansion. As his cultivation increased, the level of his defensive measures also increased. This time, Li Daochong also increased the defenses of the old mansion. He upgraded the hidden trigger talismans to strengthen level 8 and level 9 talismans. Li Tianyang didn't know how to make talismans, but he knew a thing or two about spirit arrays. In his spare time, he made some adjustments to the old mansion's original spirit arrays. Naturally, their power increased greatly. Both father and son felt that the old mansion was their base, so they did their best. In addition, Yin Ping and Li Qingyao were relatively weak, so the old mansion was their protective umbrella. Li Tianyang also placed one of his magic treasures in the old mansion. It was the hemp rope that tied up Shamo. It looked no different from a normal hemp rope, but it was actually a mystical spirit treasure. It was made from the skin and tendons of the heaven-devouring serpent python. It was then soaked in 1,000-year yang liquid for several years to cultivate a trace of yang soul. Then, it was placed in the earth fire to be instantly burned and stretched. Once it was taken out, it was immediately placed in the extreme cold Yin River to cool down. This rope looked like a rope, but it wasn't a rope. It was called the ghost-devouring 1,000-kill whip. One whip could destroy 1,000 ghosts. Jin Dan cultivators couldn't break free from this whip, unless it was yuanying. When the Blood Ape Kings group arrived at the old mansion, the early warning spirit array had already alerted Yin Ping and Li Qingyao. It also reflected the appearance and cultivation of the Blood Ape King and his group. The two women immediately hid in the underground cultivation room. This was the place where Li Tianyang had previously cultivated in seclusion. It was also the place where Princess Catherine was being held. Li Qingyao had a wooden tablet in her hand. It showed the activation of the spirit array and the release of the spirit talismans. From time to time, there would be vibrations and explosions, which made the two women tremble in fear. Jin Dan cultivators were too terrifying for them. They could easily kill them. Their only hope was the old mansion's defensive spirit array. When the last spirit talisman shot out, the last light on the wooden tablet in Li Qingyao's hand disappeared. Her expression was solemn, and her heart beat faster. The strength of the newcomer was far beyond her imagination. The defensive spirit array that her brother and father carefully designed could not stop the other party. Young miss, the 1,000-mile message still can't be sent. Young master's signal can't be received. Yin Ping said anxiously. I can't receive it either. Brother doesn't seem to be in the fourth ring star field. Li Qingyao was somewhat puzzled. Half a day ago, her brother came back to say goodbye and then left. After that, she couldn't contact him at all. How could he leave the fourth ring star field in such a short time? The 1,000-mile message could be sent as long as it was within the fourth ring star field. It couldn't be sent if it was too far away. Only a powerful cultivator could send a message over a long distance. Chapter 389. In the initial plan of the Blood Ape King and the others, they should have rescued Princess Catherine first, but in the end it was delayed again and again. At this moment, except for the Li family, the other three families of the Blue Bay Star only resisted for a while before they were completely controlled. The house of Oku's ancestor, Jin Dan, was seriously injured. More than 10 people from the Gu family were killed, including 3 Foundation establishment cultivators. 1 person from the Hong family was also killed. The ancestors of the 3 families were defeated one after another, and the higher-ups were all captured and locked in cages prepared by the Blood Knife Society in advance. Most of the people of Blue Bay Star had already fallen asleep and did not know that Blue Bay Star was experiencing a crisis. On the other side, inside the Heavenly Palace Club, it was like purgatory on Earth. Granny Blood Demon released the Blood Demon Spider Silk and wrapped the entire Heavenly Palace Club. All the members of the Flying Shuttle Gang were stuck on the huge bloody spider web. A black spider walked on the huge web, and every time it passed by a person, it would extend a black needle from its mouth and pierce the top of their head. Black Spider Soul-Searching Technique. One of Granny Blood Demon's unique skills. The Black Spider was Granny Blood Demon's magic pet, the Black Soul Spider King. The dozens of people of the Flying Shuttle Gang were like helpless little flies, at the mercy of Granny Blood Demon, without any resistance. Many members who were scared out of their wits let out heart-wrenching screams. Immortal, please spare my life. I will tell you everything I know. I know who killed your people. A member of the flying shuttle gang who was so scared that he wet himself struggled and howled. The Black Soul Spider King had already come to the top of the person next to him. That person was also begging for mercy, but it was useless. Granny Blood Demon seemed to not hear it. The Black Soul Spider King's mouth pierced the top of the person's head. Instantly, the person began to roll his eyes and his body quickly shriveled. The Black Soul Spider King absorbed all the matter in the person's brain, including his vitality and blood. In just a few seconds, the person turned into a dry corpse. At the same time, some of the memories were also transmitted to Granny Blood Demon by the Black Soul Spider King's telekinesis perception. This was already the 31st person. The information that Granny Blood Demon received was exactly the same. They didn't know where the person who killed Princess Catherine's group was now. Granny Blood Fiend currently had very limited valuable information. She only knew that this person was called Li Daochong. His cultivation was in the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm. He was extremely young, not even 20 years old. Granny Blood Demon was truly shocked that he had such a cultivation at such a young age. However, no matter how stunning he was still young and frivolous. He should have had a bright future ahead of him, but he didn't know how to act properly. He actually dared to kill a core member of the Blood Knife Society. The Blood Knife Society wasn't some random Tom, Dick, or Harry. Even if the Federation wanted to protect him, they wouldn't be able to. The Blood Knife Society was an important force in resisting the Hades and had obtained many military merit. These military merits were enough for the Blood Knife Society to wipe out the entire Blue Bay Star without any consequences. Lu Feng watched his brothers being killed one by one. His heart was depressed and his eyes were filled with despair. How could such a terrifying existence find the Flying Shuttle Society? Only now did Lu Feng truly feel the insignificance of mortals. In front of cultivators, they were nothing. The Flying Shuttle Society was a joke in the eyes of cultivators. Under normal circumstances, they were just ants on the side of the road. They could do whatever they wanted and wouldn't even look at them. But if an ant accidentally climbed onto a cultivator's table and was seen, he only needed to gently pinch it and dust it, as if nothing had happened. For ants, it was a disaster. Lu Feng didn't expect that the Flying Shuttle Society that he founded with his own hands would be almost wiped out in the blink of an eye. None of the 73 members of the Flying Shuttle Society were spared. They all became food in the belly of the Black Soul Spider King. When the Black Soul Spider King came to the top of Zhu Long's head, Lu Feng couldn't stand it anymore. Zhu Long was his good brother since childhood. "Stop, I know where he is!" Lu Feng roared. "I'm sorry, Zhenrenli." Lu Feng was sad. Between his brother and his savior, he chose the former. In fact, when every brother was killed, Lu Feng's heart was bleeding. His immobile body tightened, his fists clenched, his nails dug into his palms, and blood kept flowing out. After 73 struggles, Lu Feng's mental defense completely collapsed. Lu Feng was by no means a person who was afraid of death, but when he saw his brothers being killed one by one, he couldn't hold on any longer. Even if torture was used on Lu Feng, he would never betray anyone. But everyone had their own weaknesses. Where? Granny Blood Demon paused slightly. The Black Soul Spider King's mouth fell on the top of Zhu Long's head and stopped. Although soul-searching could get information, sometimes it was vague. At least, Granny Blood Demon couldn't be precise at the moment, so she stopped. "Brother Lu, don't. Zhenrenli is the benefactor of our Flying Shuttle Society. If it weren't for him, we would have died long ago." Zhu Long roared. "Dragon, I can't watch you die." Lu Feng sighed and then said to Granny Blood Demon, "If I'm not wrong, Zhenrenli should be underground here." Granny Blood Demon's eyes flashed. She had never expected this answer. After searching for a long time, the target was actually here? Then Granny Blood Demon's expression changed greatly. She seemed to have thought of something, She had been careless. That guy had captured Princess Catherine, so he must have known about the space crack. Had the space crack opened? How could it be so fast? A month ago, the Blood Knife Society had detected a space crack here, and then they began to plan. In order not to be noticed by their competitors, they had been very careful. After a detailed exploration of the space crack here, they began to act. At that time, they judged that the space crack would open for at least 3 months. Now, only a month had passed, and the crack had already opened? Granny Blood Demon's mental power instantly probed into the ground and immediately detected the location of the crack. It had really opened. Immortal, we are just mortals. Can you let us go? Lu Feng, the leader of the Flying Shuttle Society, was like a helpless child at this time. Puff? Stop. As soon as Lu Feng's voice fell, the Blood Soul Spider King's mouth, which was hanging above Zhulong, pierced Zhulong's head without warning. Zhulong, one of the 3 golden fighters of the Flying Shuttle Society, died on the spot. You! Lu Feng's eyes were blood-red as he glared at Granny Blood Demon. At this time, the latter was as if she was meditating and didn't even look at Lu Feng. How could Granny Blood Demon care about the feelings of an ant? Now that she knew where the target was, these prisoners were useless. At this time, on the other side of the space crack, Li Daochong didn't stop for a moment. He killed thousands of nether ghosts, and the amount of spiritual qi in his body increased slightly, approaching Jean Dan's stage little by little. In the old house, the Blood Ape King turned into a blood-colored giant ape and punched a hole in the ground. The underground cultivation room was immediately exposed. Li Qingyao and Yinping lost all their barriers. The terrifying pressure of Jean Dan made them tremble involuntarily. Hu Ling waved her hand, and a ray of light shot onto Princess Catherine. The chains that bound Princess Catherine immediately broke. After regaining her freedom, Princess Catherine jumped up and landed in front of the Blood Ape King. She knelt down and bowed. This subordinate is incompetent and couldn't complete the mission. I am willing to accept the punishment. The Blood Ape King's attention wasn't on Princess Catherine, but on Yinping and Li Qingyao, who were curled up in the corner. The Blood Ape King stretched out his hand, and the 2 women were sucked into the ground like leaves in the wind. How dare you imprison my people? You're courting death, the Blood Ape King said in a low voice. He raised his hand and slapped Li Qingyao's head. No! Yinping screamed. She tried to push Li Qingyao away, but she couldn't move at all. Li Qingyao was completely disheartened. Suddenly, a ray of golden light flashed. The Blood Ape King instantly changed his hand gesture. The palm that was slapping Li Qingyao changed direction and swung into the air, colliding with the golden light. With a bang, the Blood Ape King retreated 3 steps. Chapter 390. Master. Father. Looking at Li Tianyang's back, Yinping and Li Qingyao called out at the same time. Stay away so you don't get hurt, Li Tianyang said without turning around. The 2 girls didn't hesitate and ran towards the back door of the house. They knew that they would only be a burden to Li Tianyang if they stayed. Don't even think about leaving, the Blood Ape King said coldly. With that, a blood-colored broadsword slashed in the direction of the 2 girls. Li Tianyang's expression changed slightly. He moved instantly and a golden spear appeared in his hand. He flicked the spear, bringing with it a blazing light. Clang! The 2 weapons clashed and sparks flew everywhere. The blood-colored broadsword was flicked away by Li Tianyang's spear. The Blood Ape King was stunned. He didn't expect the newcomer to be able to resolve his thunderous attack so easily. Hu Ling didn't stay idle either. The 2 weak girls were with the captive Princess Catherine. They must have a special relationship with the captive Princess Catherine. Capturing the 2 girls might save them a lot of trouble. Although Hu Ling was confident in the Blood Knife Society's strength, judging from the defense of the old house, the other party's strength couldn't be underestimated. If he was really a genius spirit sequencer, Perhaps he could be used by the Blood Knife Society. The 4 core members who died weren't worth mentioning compared to a genius spirit sequencer. If the other party was worthless, he could just kill them all. If they were, these 2 girls could be used as bargaining chips. Hu Ling-er's figure was like a ghost. She used the 9-tail spirit wave steps and left behind a few afterimages, appearing behind the 2 girls. 2 jade hands grabbed the 2 girls' shoulders at the same time. Just as she was about to grab them, Hu Ling-er felt a chill on her back. She quickly retracted her hand and jumped to the other side. A round of spear light stabbed at her, but she barely dodged it. Hu Ling-er's reaction speed was fast enough, but she was still hit by a strand of spear chi. The high-grade heaven-class magic robe on her body was torn apart, revealing a snow-white area inside. The 2 masters of the Blood Knife Society attacked at the same time, but Li Tianyang blocked them both. Yinping and Li Qingyao, who had low cultivation, had no idea of the crisis behind them. They had already run out of the back door of the old house. When Li Qingyao passed by the side room, she didn't forget to glance inside. Inside the room was a burly man with coarse skin, a slightly pointy head, and a fin-like object on his back. That burly man was lying on the ground, tied up by a hemp rope. His appearance was rather wretched. It was the trapped Sha Mo. Seeing that Li Qingyao was looking at him, Sha Mo let out a ferocious roar. The sound waves surged towards Li Qingyao with intense true qi. Li Qingyao had never seen such a monster before. She let out a soft cry and ran even faster out of the back door of the old house. Sha Mo's sound wave didn't even make it out. More than half of it was absorbed by the Yin energy on the sky-devouring thousand ghosts whip, while the rest was reflected by the walls of the house. Sha Mo was so shocked by his own roar that he felt dizzy. Seeing that Yinping and Li Qingyao had left, Li Tianyang's heart calmed down. The aura in his body surged wildly, and his battle intent soared. After recovering his cultivation, Li Tianyang hadn't really fought yet. His hot-bloodedness from back then had been completely aroused. Facing the Blood Ape King, who was at the peak of Jin Dan, Li Tianyang didn't show any fear. Instead, he was extremely excited. Hu Ling-er didn't chase after the 2 women since she couldn't catch them. She could feel Li Tianyang's strength and determination to save the 2 women. If it was just strength, Hu Ling-er wouldn't be afraid. Both of them were at the mid-stage of Jin Dan, so there was nothing to be afraid of. However, her woman's intuition told her that Li Tianyang would fight her to the death if she pursued relentlessly. Cultivators with this kind of character were the most terrifying and difficult to deal with. The Blood Ape King didn't think as much as Hu Ling-er. He retracted his blood saber and jumped up, roaring, "Nirvana Blood Saber!" The 2-meter-long and half-meter-wide blood-colored saber slashed in the direction of the 2 women with a tsunami-like saber aura. The Blood Ape King was truly enraged and didn't hold back at all in this attack. Li Tianyang was already prepared. The golden spear in his hand let out a long whistle and swept out. The blazing sun was in the sky. The spear aura was as dazzling as the blazing sun, bringing a giant spear shadow with it. On one side was the blood-colored saber shadow. On the other side was the blazing sun. The 2 forces soared into the sky with a brilliance, and the shadow reached a height of more than 100 meters. The power of the Jin Dan cultivator's moves was far beyond imagination. Boom! The saber shadow and the spear aura collided with a deafening sound. The 2 forces completely exploded. A mushroom cloud soared into the sky with a diameter of more than half a mile. With the old house as the center, hundreds of not very sturdy bungalows in the slums were razed to the ground in an instant. Silver Bottle and Li Qingyao almost didn't escape from such a powerful aftershock. But at the moment of the explosion, a spiritual gang barrier appeared in front of the 2 women and blocked the aftershock. Li Qingyao took out the flying shuttle and quickly flew away, but the flying shuttle still swayed and rolled in the air several times before it stabilized. The spiritual gang barrier was naturally created by Li Tianyang. Otherwise, the two women would have already been annihilated in the explosion. Li Tianyang retreated dozens of steps and didn't stop until he hit a broken wall. The qi and blood in his body were boiling, and a mouthful of blood rushed to his throat. Li Tianyang didn't spit it out. The Blood Ape King didn't move at all. He held a blood-colored giant saber in his hand and looked at the sky regretfully. They still ran away. Although the Blood Ape King had the absolute upper hand and didn't retreat a single step after this attack, his qi and blood were a little unstable. If he didn't adjust his breath for a while, he would be in a mess. The Blood Ape King lowered his head and looked at Li Tianyang with a hint of killing intent in his eyes. There was actually someone on a trash cultivation planet like the Blue Bay Star who could block his attack. Although the Blood Ape King only used 70% of his strength in this attack, he was after all at the peak of Jin Dan and was only one step away from Yuanying. 70% of his strength was enough to defeat all the Jin Dan self-cultivators, but the guy who suddenly appeared blocked it. And the injury didn't seem to be serious. 2 ants ran away, but a big fish came. Good. The Blood Ape King showed a gloomy smile and looked at Li Tianyang. You are the one who killed my men? Li Tianyang didn't answer and quickly adjusted his qi and blood in his body. Princess Catherine said, President, it's not him. It's his son. The Blood Ape King raised his blood-red thick eyebrows. Oh? His son ran away, and his father came to take his place? Isn't this what they call a scam? Princess Catherine looked a little surprised when she said this. She didn't expect Li Daochong's father, Li Tianyang, to be so strong. Li Daochong was already strong enough. Princess Catherine had once thought that no one on the Blue Bay Star was stronger than him, even though he was only at the late stage of the Foundation establishment stage. She didn't expect his father to be stronger than him. A mid-stage Jin Dan cultivator could be considered a superstructure even on a third-class cultivation planet. At this moment, a few rays of light flashed in the sky. The Blood Knife Society's subordinates from the other 3 families rushed over with the higher-ups of the 3 families in tow. Dozens of higher-ups from the House of Oku, the Gu family, and the Hong family saw the mess below. Even the Patriarch of Jin Dan revealed a look of shock. The slum buildings with the old mansion as the center had all disappeared. The ground had obviously sunk, and the air was filled with a strong burnt smell. Outside the slum, groups of poor people fled in all directions. They didn't know what had happened and thought it was an earthquake. The Blood Knife Society's elders and the head of the Law Enforcement Hall were also shocked. In their opinion, the Blood Ape King had come personally, and it would be a piece of cake for them to rescue Princess Catherine and take him down without any effort. Who would have thought that such a majestic battle would occur? The Blood Knife Society's subordinates didn't dare to land. They hovered above the high school and looked down. Chapter 391. Li Tianyang's square face revealed a scornful smile. Hairy monkey, if you become the Li family's pet, I can consider letting your Blood Knife Society go. The moment he said this, the Blood Ape King's face turned livid. Hu Ling looked at Li Tianyang with interest. This uncle was very special. Not only was he not afraid of the Blood Ape King, who was much stronger than him, he even dared to provoke it. The members of the Blood Knife Society in the air were all shocked. They looked at Li Tianyang as if they were looking at an idiot. Even if he wanted to die, this was not the way to do it. The higher-ups of the 3 families who were locked in the spirit magnetic cage felt very happy for a moment when they heard Li Tianyang's words. But soon, many people's faces turned gloomy and they sighed. What was the use of talking? It would only anger the Blood Ape King. Li Tianyang might be strong, but he was not on the same level as the Blood Ape King. Li Tianyang being able to exchange a few blows with the Blood Ape King had already exceeded many people's expectations, especially the progenitor of the 3 families, Jin Dan. The progenitor of the House of Oku, Aofuhai, had a look of admiration. Li Tianyang is indeed a genius. The progenitor of the Gu family, Gu Jiuyang, twitched his eyes. If fellow Taoist Tianyang did not stay in a small place like the Blue Bay Star, his achievements would be even greater. The Hong family's progenitor, Hong Xiangtian, nodded and said, "That's right. We can't even defeat the Hall Master of the Blood Knife Society's Law Enforcement Hall." The Li family sent news that one of the Blood Knife Society's Law Enforcement Hall Master was defeated and captured by Li Tianyang. Meanwhile, all three of our families were captured. The difference between us is obvious. I have been in the Jin Dan realm for more than 100 years, but I can't even compare to a junior who has only been in the Jin Dan realm for more than 10 years. I am ashamed. Ao Fuhai continued. Fellow Taoist Heavenly Son suffered a serious injury more than a year ago, and his Jin Dan was completely shattered. Just what did he experience during this period of time? Not only did he recover his cultivation, but he even advanced a step further? Gu Jiuyang suddenly thought of something and his expression changed. Could it be that the lightning tribulation that happened at sea a few days ago was triggered by Taoist Heavenly Son? His Ao Fuhai and Hong Xiangtian sucked in a breath of cold air at the same time. Gu Jiuyang's words were highly likely to be true. In recent years, no one in the Blue Bay Star had a chance of making a breakthrough. After that day, Li Tianyang returned as the king and quickly reorganized the Li family, becoming the head of the family once again. Who else could trigger the lightning tribulation other than him? The three Jin Dan patriarchs looked at each other in dismay. They were all surprised that Li Tianyang could still cultivate after suffering such serious injuries. Based on their knowledge and experience, unless a soul formation stage cultivator intervened or consumed a legendary elixir, there was absolutely no way to recover from such an injury. Just as Jin Dan of the three great clans was speaking, a loud explosion came from below. The Blood Ape King attacked. A heavenly demon blood blade shot out like a bolt of lightning. Li Tianyang only had time to raise his spear and didn't even see the trajectory of the blood blade. Luckily, his spear blocked the blood blade. Li Tianyang was sent flying like a cannonball and crashed into a house a few hundred meters away. Whoosh! Without any pause, Li Tianyang flew out from the rubble with the golden spear in his hand. He turned into a beam of golden light and shot towards the Blood Ape King. "You overestimate yourself." The Blood Ape King sneered, but there was still a hint of surprise in his eyes. It was the first time the Blood Ape King had seen a mid-stage Jin Dan cultivator who could still be so lively after taking two of his attacks. Li Tianyang yelled, "Heavenly Wheel Destruction." The golden spear shot out and turned into a giant arrow. The Blood Ape King's body expanded slightly. He didn't move from his spot as demonic aura surged around him. He looked at the golden spear light flying towards him. The moment the light hit the Blood Ape King, the Blood Ape King roared, "Ha!" He didn't use any moves or techniques. He just swung his blade. Boom! The golden spear light dissipated with a deafening sound. The golden light that enveloped Li Tianyang quickly disappeared. Li Tianyang retreated more than 10 steps. He couldn't control the blood in his mouth anymore. After this attack, Li Tianyang suffered internal injuries. The Blood Ape King smirked. "I thought you could fight with me, but it seems like you're only SOSO. With that said, the Blood Ape King's figure flashed and swung his blade again. Li Tianyang's eyes narrowed as he raised his spear to block. With a crisp sound, Li Tianyang retreated again. He felt as if his meridians were about to explode. The chi of a peak Jin Dan cultivator was as vast as the ocean. Whether it was strength or chi, they were on a different level. The Blood Ape King didn't even use his full strength. He was just swinging his blade in the air. Li Tianyang isn't his match. The Blood Ape King is too strong. Orson clenched his fists in the spiritual magnetic cage and said unwillingly, "Is this the strength of a peak Jin Dan cultivator?" The #1 expert of Blue Bay Star, Li Tianyang, is completely unable to withstand it. Gu Chao exclaimed. Ha ha ha, this feels great. Just when everyone thought that Li Tianyang couldn't do it, he suddenly laughed. There was blood at the corner of his mouth. His originally weak aura rose to the peak again. It was even stronger than before. The Blood Ape King was slightly stunned. Before he could react, the golden spear light flashed. Clang clang clang, in an instant, shadows flashed. The blood-colored blade light and the golden spear light danced in the ruins. One moment, they appeared hundreds of meters away. The next moment they appeared in the night sky. Apart from Hu Ling who was following the two shadows with her beautiful eyes, the others couldn't see them clearly. They could only follow the light. But when they looked, what was left behind was only an afterimage. Patriarch Jin Dan of the three major clans was shocked when he saw this. Li Tianyang was actually able to erupt with such powerful strength after being injured. Boom! Just when everyone was shocked, the golden light smashed into the ground like a meteor. A deep crater with a diameter of more than 50 meters was formed when the meteor hit the ground. Li Tianyang struggled to get up. He held the spear with one hand to support his body. The Blood Ape King descended from the sky and looked down at Li Tianyang. You are really not bad. It's a pity that you have a reckless son. Otherwise, in another 10 years, this king might not be your match. It's a pity that you are ruined by your son. You killed my brothers of the Blood Knife Society. A debt of blood must be paid with blood. I will send you on your way first. Soon, your son will meet you on the road to hell. 20 minutes ago, in the Heavenly Palace Club, Granny Blood Demon wanted to send the news as soon as she found out that the space crack had opened. Just when Granny Blood Demon was about to send the message, a psychic power came out of the crack and collided with her psychic power. Granny Blood Demon suddenly felt dizzy. The Black Soul Spider King, who was about to stab his mouth into Blue Phoenix's head, was also affected and almost fell from the bloody spider web. Blue Phoenix, who thought she was going to die, escaped. Lu Feng's eyes were red and his face was ferocious. He looked at Granny Blood Demon with fire in his eyes. If he could, Lu Feng would not hesitate to pounce on the old woman and eat her alive. His brothers were all dead. All of them were dead. It was only a matter of time before Blue Phoenix was killed. Granny Blood Demon was in a trance for a few seconds before coming back to her senses. The Black Soul Spider King, who was on the verge of collapse, staggered on the spider web and finally stabilized its body. Granny Blood Demon suddenly had a bad feeling. A sharp light flashed in her turbid eyes. Black Spider, kill them and follow me to the underground. Hiss hiss. The Black Soul Spider King let out a few hisses and quickly climbed above Blue Phoenix's head. It stretched out its mouth and was about to stab into Blue Phoenix's head. Swish! An ink-colored light flashed. Poochie! A Tsang ink saber appeared and pierced through the Black Soul Spider King. The Black Soul Spider King let out another miserable shriek as its mouthpart stopped a few inches above Blue Phoenix's head. It wanted to kill Blue Phoenix with all its might. Its mouth trembled and lowered a little. Bang, 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 many parts of the Black Soul Spider King's body exploded and finally fell apart, shattering on top of Blue Phoenix's head. The azure ink saber flashed with electric sparks, instantly annihilating the fragments of the Black Soul Spider King's body. Even the black liquid that burst out evaporated and disappeared. Granny Blood Demon let out a sharp cry as she watched the Black Soul Spider King, which she had carefully cultivated for decades, disappear into nothingness. No! Her voice was like a wolf's howl. Lu Feng and Blue Phoenix felt their eardrums were about to be pierced and their heads were buzzing. Who? Who is it? Come out! Granny Blood Demon shouted crazily. Whoosh! With a gust of wind, the spider silk wrapped around Lu Feng and Blue Phoenix loosened, and they fell to the ground. Li Daochong had unknowingly appeared behind the two of them. Zhenren Li Daochong. Lu Feng turned around and saw Li Daochong. Li Daochong glanced at Lu Feng and nodded slightly. He frowned slightly and asked, "What's the matter?" Zhenrenli, run. The people of the Blood Knife Society are here to take revenge on you. Lu Feng had no time to explain. The aura of the old woman was terrifying, far beyond Lu Feng's imagination. In his opinion, Li Daochong was no match for her no matter how powerful he was. Did you kill my black spider? A red light shot out of Granny Blood Demon's old eyes. Li Daochong stretched out his hand, and the tsang ink that was stuck in the spider web flew into his hand. He glanced at the dozens of dried corpses on the huge spider web, and his eyes were cold. Did you kill them? A group of ants. So what if I killed them? You killed my black spider. I will refine you into a black soul and sacrifice you to my Zhu. You will be my slave for the rest of your life. Granny Blood Demon's face was distorted. She threw the deadwood staff in her hand, which turned into a giant dead tree. The dead branches without leaves wrapped around Li Daochong like a black snake. Zhenrenli, be careful, Blue Phoenix cried out. A cruel smile appeared on Granny Blood Demon's face. Once entangled by the black dead tree formed by the deadwood staff, one's soul would turn black and slowly melt into an unconscious black soul, becoming her puppet. However, the dead branches stopped half a meter away from Li Daochong, unable to move any further. Granny Blood Demon's smiling face froze. What? Li Daochong's aura surged out like a wave. His whole body was wrapped in a cloud of spiritual gang, and his eyes flashed with blue-golden lightning. Just half an hour ago, after Li Daochong killed 2,000 nether ghosts on the dead star on the other side of the space crack, he absorbed enough power of the dead souls to successfully upgrade and break through to the Jin Dan stage. He had survived the Jin Dan Thunder Tribulation on the dead star. Fortunately, it was a dead star. If it had been on Blue Bay Star, it would have been a disaster. The Thunder Tribulation triggered by Li Daochong was 100 times more powerful than that of Li Tianyang. Whether it was the power or the range, it was unimaginable. Fortunately, the nether ghosts that kept coming became Li Daochong's lightning rod. Although he would inevitably be hit by lightning, with so many nether ghosts sharing the burden, the pressure on Li Daochong was much less. A total of 81 heavenly thunders fell from the sky, turning the area within 100 kilometers of the space crack into scorched earth. The ground seemed to have been bombarded tens of thousands of times by cannonballs. It took half an hour for it to end. If Li Daochong only relied on himself to resist it, even if he could, he would lose half of his life. He would not be able to recover in a few months. However, some of the nether ghosts that were used as shields by Li Daochong were killed by Li Daochong and transformed into spiritual qi. After a while, the shocking Thunder Tribulation did not cause much harm to Li Daochong. He passed through it almost unscathed. Chapter 392. The Black Death branch transformed from the dead wood staff couldn't even break Li Daochong's protective spiritual Highland shield. The expression on Granny Blood Demon's old face changed from anger to astonishment. The kid in front of her was actually a Jin Dan cultivator. As one of the 3 elders of the Blood Knife Society, Granny Blood Demon was only at the middle stage of Jin Dan. She could ignore everything below Jin Dan and destroy them with a flip of her hand. However, the Jin Dan stage was different. Even if it was an early-stage Jin Dan cultivator who had just condensed a Jin Dan, it wasn't easy to kill them. Even if Granny Blood Demon had condensed a Jin Dan more than 100 years ago, the path of cultivation had always been more difficult as one progressed. Granny Blood Demon's previous arrogance disappeared in an instant, and even her anger was restrained. There was a bit of fear in her old eyes that were emitting a strange brilliance. To be able to step into the Jin Dan stage at such a young age, he was undoubtedly a genius. Moreover, he had already surpassed ordinary geniuses and belonged to the ranks of the top geniuses. Granny Blood Demon suddenly had some doubts. In the Federation, there were no more than 10 people who could condense a Jin Dan before the age of 20. All of them were geniuses of the Federation and were famous. Why hadn't she seen this kid before? If it was just an ordinary early-stage Gene Dan cultivator, Granny Blood Demon still wouldn't pay attention to him. However, it was another matter for the top geniuses. They were invincible in the same level and could even fight and win. In other words, this kid in front of her was at the early stage of Gene Dan, but his strength was at least at the middle stage of Gene Dan. Granny Blood Demon suddenly felt a slight chill on her back. Li Daocheng's hand that was holding Tsang Ink loosened. Tsang Ink turned into a light shadow and fell under his feet, floating slightly by relying on Li Daocheng. Li Daocheng flicked his finger, and a bolt of lightning shot out. With a crack, the black death tree in front of her was split in half by the lightning, reverting to the deadwood staff and breaking into two pieces. Granny Blood Demon snorted, and her chi and blood surged. The black death tree was transformed with her support, so it was destroyed by an external force and would suffer a backlash. So strong? Granny Blood Demon's heart skipped a beat. Her fighting spirit plummeted. The probability of a mid-stage Gene Dan demon being frightened by an early-stage Gene Dan human was only 1 in 10,000. Demons of the same level would always be stronger than humans. This was determined by their innate physique. Demons were born with strong bodies, long lifespans, and the ability to transform. Most of them were born with divine strength and innate abilities. These were all things that humans could not compare to. But at this moment, Granny Blood Demon was inexplicably afraid of Li Daocheng, just like a lower-level cultivator facing a higher-level cultivator. "Who are you?" Granny Blood Demon tried her best to restrain the fear in her heart as she asked. "Dead people don't need to know," Li Daocheng said calmly. As he spoke, Li Daocheng opened his palm and 2 wrinkled talismans appeared. "Damn you, brat, you sure talk big. Don't think that you're so arrogant just because you're talented. Do you think that the demon clan is the same as you humans? Granny will let you experience the terror of the demon clan today." As Granny Blood Demon spoke, her old and shriveled body began to grow rapidly. Monstrous aura surged from her body. Lu Feng and Qing Huang were already injured. At this moment, they were enveloped by the strong monstrous aura. They felt extremely uncomfortable, as if they were about to be ignited. In just a few seconds, Granny Blood Demon turned into a giant 8-clawed spider. Other than her face, she no longer had any human form. After the demon clan transformed, their strength would rise to another level and reach their ultimate form. Although they could not maintain it for too long, it was enough to deal with a battle. Li Daocheng's expression did not change at all, but there was a bit of curiosity in his eyes. He had seen many dark ghosts and human cultivators. This was only the second time he had encountered a demon clan. The first time was with Princess Catherine and the other 5 demon clan members. However, their strength was not considered strong. Compared to Granny Blood Demon, who had transformed, Princess Catherine and the others were just a few small insects. But the current Li Daocheng was no longer the Li Daocheng from before. Li Daocheng was a bug-like existence here. As his level continued to rise, Li Daocheng's state of mind also changed. His understanding of the hot-blooded upgrader also deepened. "Young man, I've made you wait for a long time." Granny Blood Demon's voice was no longer the voice of an old woman. Instead, it was sharp and ear-piercing, as if it came from the abyss. "It's okay. Wait a little longer." As Li Daocheng spoke, he suddenly paused and his expression changed. He sensed that 20 to 30 kilometers away, Li Tianyang's aura was changing. His father was fighting with someone. "Are there others?" Li Daocheng changed the topic, his tone as cold as frost. "Why? Are you afraid?" Granny Blood Demon sneered. "It's right to be afraid. You shouldn't have provoked the Blood Knife Society." While speaking, Li Daocheng sensed that his father's aura had weakened. Blue-gold sparks crackled in his eyes, and the 2 talismans in his hands whistled out. These were 2 level 9 spirit energy talismans, 1 fire and 1 ice. They were also Li Daocheng's last 2 level 9 spirit talismans. The rest were used when he fought against the group of ghosts on the Death Star. There was also a level 10 spirit talisman that Li Daocheng did not use. Granny Blood Demon sensed danger and spat out a blood-colored spider web from her mouth to block the 2 spirit talismans. Level 9 spirit talismans are useless against me. If it was a level 10 spirit talisman, I would really have to retreat. Granny Blood Demon blocked the 2 spirit talismans proudly. The blood-colored spider web directly wrapped the 2 spirit talismans. Boom! The 2 spirit talismans exploded in the spider web. All the energy was compressed in the spider web. With a bang, the spider web turned into powder, and the 2 forces cancelled each other out. Zing! Song ink flashed by. Granny Blood Demon did not have time to react. Her body suddenly shook. No, impossible. Granny Blood Demon trembled and spat out a few words in horror. A line of blood appeared on her face. Li Daocheng had unknowingly swung his blade, and Granny Blood Demon did not see it clearly. The defense of the monster race's flesh was comparable to that of the human race's Taoist robes. In her spider form, Granny Blood Demon was equivalent to wearing spider-shaped armor. Even if a Jin Dan cultivator of the human race cut with a weapon, in most cases, it would not leave a trace. But at this moment she was cut in half by a blade. Lu Feng and Qing Huang were dumbfounded as they watched the terrifying giant spider split in half and fall to the side. No time to see your horror. Li Daocheng dropped a sentence and soared into the sky, smashing through the heavenly palace club and flying away. Only Lu Feng and Blue Phoenix were left standing there in a daze. They stared at Granny Blood Demon's spider body that had been split in half, exploding from the inside out. The rend effect then erupted, leaving behind a pool of black blood and nothing else. A blood-red Yao core fell to the ground. Lu Feng and Qing Huang looked at each other, and were about to go forward to see what happened when the monster core flew into the sky and disappeared as if it was sucked in by a suction force. At this moment, Li Daocheng was already several kilometers away. The monster core fell into his hand. After taking a look at the monster core, Li Daocheng immediately put it into his storage bag. Then, a dazzling brilliance burst out from his body. With a bang, he shot out like a cannonball. A strange phenomenon appeared in the night sky, and the space seemed to be compressed. The entire Tianyuan city could see the brilliance of the waste that suddenly appeared in the sky, but it disappeared in an instant. It was like a meteor streaking across the night sky. In the sky above the old mansion, the members of the Blood Knife Society looked down with contempt. Li Tianyang's final attack was nothing more than a desperate attack by an ordinary lone wolf against a desolate beast. Although a lone wolf was brave, in front of a desolate beast, a desperate attack was futile. This was because the lone wolf's sharp teeth had even pierced through the desolate beast's skin. From beginning to end, the Blood Ape King hadn't used his full strength. To him, this was nothing more than a game to pass time. Li Tianyang stood in the giant pit covered in wounds, but there was still no fear in his eyes. He spat out a mouthful of blood. "Hairy monkey, is this all you've got? That useless blade of yours didn't even feel anything when it hit me. Is that blade used to shave fur? You're still so stubborn even when you're about to die. You humans are really good at talking. No other race can compare to you. Die." The Blood Ape King didn't seem to care about what Li Tianyang said, but in fact, every time Li Tianyang called him a hairy monkey, he would be furious. Now that the Sky Devil Bloodblade was called a shaving blade, the Blood Ape King was hopping mad. Although the 3 great clans in the prison in the sky didn't have a good impression of Li Tianyang, as fellow clansmen, they couldn't help but feel pity for him when they saw the Blue Bay Star's #1 expert about to be killed. Li Daocheng really shouldn't have provoked the Blood Knife Society. This time, he killed his father. Li Daocheng killed his father, and now he's killed us too. Many people shook their heads and sighed. The blood blade in the Blood Ape King's hand suddenly buzzed, and the huge blade seemed to dance happily. Boss is going to use that move. It's just a slightly stronger mouse. Using this move feels like cutting off a sparrow's head with a butcher's knife. Li Tianyong forced himself to take a deep breath and pulled out his spear to fight again. However, as soon as he moved, a bloody light shrouded him, completely suppressing him and making him unable to move. The Blood Ape King smiled coldly. Less than 5 people have seen this move of mine. You should feel honored to die under the Blood Moon Blade. As he spoke, the Blood Ape King swept the blood blade in his hand horizontally, and a bloody moon appeared. A terrifying bloody color exploded in the darkness, dyeing half of Tianyuan City red. Just when everyone thought Li Tianyong was definitely going to die, a piercing sound came from afar. In the blink of an eye, an inky brilliance flashed over. It was so fast that it was like teleportation. A huge Tsang ink blade light that was dozens of meters long slashed over like a tsunami. The 9th level of the 9-split blade technique, 9-split blade cut. The bloody moon and Tsang ink blade light collided. Boom! A dazzling light exploded. Chapter 393. Many of the Blood Knife Society's cultivators were sent flying by the shockwave, and the people from the 3 great clans in the cages were even more miserable. Many people were sent flying by the powerful shockwave and slammed into the walls of the spirit magnetic cage, their faces immediately swollen and bruised. Hu Ling-er, who was the closest, had no choice but to support her protective aura to barely resist. No one knew what had happened. Only the Blood Ape King stared at the young man who appeared out of nowhere and instantly rescued Li Tianyong from the huge pit. When the shock wave gradually dissipated, the slums that had been filled with dilapidated bungalows not long ago had turned into a scorched land. On the empty scorched land, Li Daochong supported Li Tianyong and landed on a broken piece of land dozens of meters away. Li Daochong. Someone in the cage stuttered. The others looked at Li Daochong in surprise. Although it was night, there was not a single cloud in the night sky. A huge half-moon hung in the sky, and the cold moonlight shone on the ground, making everything clear. Even an idiot could see that Li Daochong was different from before. No, impossible. Someone else immediately spoke up. This voice expressed the thoughts of everyone in the 3 great clans. They all sensed that Li Daochong's aura had undergone a qualitative change. Jin Dan stage. But how was this possible? Although Li Daochong was already ridiculously strong at the Jade Splendor Hotel, he was clearly only in the late stage of foundation establishment at that time. Only 10 days had passed, and he had already condensed Jin Dan? Not to mention the Federation, even in the 3 great cultivation empires, they were probably as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. But the truth was right in front of them, and they had no choice but to believe it. The people from the Blood Knife Society were also surprised, but they were not surprised by Li Daochong's sudden increase in cultivation, but by his ability to block the Blood Ape King's killing move. Hu Ling-er's beautiful eyes flickered, and a hint of astonishment appeared on her beautiful face. At this moment, she could only see Li Daochong's side profile. This strange young man made her feel fear from the bottom of her heart. This was the second time in more than 30 years that Hu Ling-er had such a feeling. The last time was not that long ago, when she saw that person in the Federation's Central Star Field 3 years ago. However, the 2 times were slightly different. When she faced that person, Hu Ling-er felt an unstoppable might. However, the young man in front of her gave her an unfathomable feeling of the unknown. The former was domineering and biting cold, while the latter was gentle, but it made one's heart turn cold. If this king is not wrong, you are Li Daochong, the one who killed 4 core members of my Blood Knife Society. Although the Blood Ape King was shocked that the young man could block his blood moon wheel slash, he was relieved after checking the young man's cultivation. No matter how strong Jin Dan was, he would not be a match for Zhang Xian. That saber gleam must have been augmented by something special, or a superior mystical spiritual treasure, or a level 10 or above energy talisman. Otherwise, how could a primary Jin Dan be able to release such a powerful attack? Li Daochong ignored the Blood Ape King's question and helped Li Tianyang up. "Dad, are you okay?" "Haha, of course I'm fine. I can still fight another 300 rounds, cough cough." Li Tianyang laughed loudly, but then he coughed violently. His internal injuries were not light. A stream of pure spiritual qi was transferred into Li Tianyang's body, making him feel much better and stopping his coughing. Li Daochong stabilized Li Tianyang's injuries and said calmly, "Dad, stand a little further away. Watch how I pull out that monkey's fur one by one." "Okay, remember not to pull them out one by one. Pull them out in bunches. That's the most satisfying way," Li Tianyang replied. The father and son completely ignored the others and did not hide their conversation at all. The last sentence sounded rather comical in the ears of the others. Were the father and son's brains damaged? What did they think the Blood Ape King was? Was he really a monkey? That was a peak Jin Dan cultivator, and he was also a demon. Even though the Blood Ape King was only a peak Jin Dan cultivator, his strength had already reached a terrifying level. He was considered to be in the middle of the Federation. Above him was a great cultivator like Yuanying, who was a true immortal. Exalted immortal of the Blood Knife Society, every injustice has its perpetrator and every debt has its debtor. The real culprit is here. Can you let us go? A weaker Gu family worshipper said to the Blood Knife Society's Law Enforcement Hall Master, Battle Lion Cha Deli, who was floating in front of the cage with a long face. The fluffy blonde Cha Deli did not even look at that cultivator. He extended his hand and his steel-like black fingernails pierced through that cultivator's head. The other cultivators in the cage were all horrified. This group of demons did not play by the rules. They killed as they pleased. Your Blood Knife Society is so overbearing. Do you really think that the Federation will not pursue the matter? Someone could not stand it anymore and said sternly. Whoosh! A long sword shot into the cage. Poochie! The heart of the cultivator who spoke was pierced, and he fell down unwillingly with his eyes wide open. "Uncle Wang!" Orson roared. His eyes were red as he rushed forward to hug that cultivator. Uncle Wang was a worshipper of the House of Oku. He had stayed in the House of Oku since he was young and specialized in teaching the underage disciples of the House of Oku. He had watched Orson grow up, and because Orson was very much to Uncle Wang's liking, he often gave Orson special treatment and taught him many battle techniques. Uncle Wang had contributed greatly to Orson's achievements today. In the family, other than a few blood relatives, Orson liked Uncle Wang the most. At this moment, Uncle Wang was killed just because he said one sentence. Orson's anger could not be suppressed. Just as Orson was about to explode, someone tapped his lower back. The old ancestor of the House of Oku, Ao Fuhai, saw that Orson had lost control of his emotions and instantly took action to control him. With Orson's temperament, he would definitely curse out loud. Given the style of the Blood Knife Society, he would be killed in the next moment. Orson stood in place with bloodshot eyes. He only hated that he was not strong enough. "If anyone barks again, I will kill all of you," a Blood Knife Society cultivator angrily rebuked. In the cage, the cultivators of the Blue Bay Star no longer dared to make a sound. Everyone was in danger. Even the old ancestor of the three great clans, Jin Dan, was silent. "Bastard, what's with that look?" That Blood Knife Society cultivator saw Orson glaring at him and scolding him. As he spoke, he was about to draw his long sword. The old ancestor of the House of Oku, Ao Fuhai, anxiously said, "Immortal, please calm down." However, before he could finish his sentence, that Blood Knife Society cultivator had already made his move. His long sword shot towards Orson like lightning. Whoosh! At that moment, a Tsang ink brilliance flashed and shattered the flying long sword. The Blood Knife Society cultivator, who was still threatening half a second ago, stared down in disbelief. Bang! His head exploded, and a headless corpse fell from the sky. The Tsang Ink saber belonged to Li Daochong, but no one saw when he made his move. Even the Blood Ape King did not see it clearly. Daring to kill a core member of the Blood Knife Society in front of him was a blatant provocation. No, it was a humiliation to the Blood Knife Society. "You're courting death." The Blood Ape King was furious. The Sky Devil blood saber in his hand buzzed and turned into a blood-red light that shot towards Li Daochong. The Blood Knife Society cultivators, who were looking down on the ground and waiting to watch a good show, saw the Vice Hall Master of the Law Enforcement Hall get insta-killed. Their expressions clearly changed. Their eyes were filled with vigilance, afraid that they would fall for the same trick. Some of them even quietly flew away to distance themselves. War Lion Cha Deli frowned. "What are you afraid of? Whoever takes a step back will die. The Blood Knife Society doesn't want cowards." Whoosh! As soon as Cha Deli finished speaking, a saber gleam flashed. Less than 10 meters away from him, a Blood Knife Society cultivator was split in half. Blood rained down from the sky, and the halved corpse fell to the ground. Li Daochong appeared in the air 10 meters away from Cha Deli. When the Blood Ape King slashed with his saber, Li Daochong's figure was nowhere to be seen. There was nothing but air. As soon as Cha Deli finished speaking, Li Daochong appeared in front of him. A bean-sized bead of sweat dripped down from the back of his head. Li Daochong did not even look at Cha Deli as he disappeared again. Several Tsang Ink lights flashed in the air. Several Blood Knife Society cultivators were killed before they could even react. The remaining Blood Knife Society cultivators could no longer hold back and fled in all directions. When Li Daochong appeared again, he was less than 5 meters away from Cha Deli. He said faintly, "They ran away. They're all cowards. You can go and kill them now." Cha Deli was so angry that he almost vomited blood. "Oh, that's right. Open the cage before you go after them. I'll give you 10 seconds. Otherwise, die." Li Daochong turned around and slashed with his saber after he said that. The Blood Ape King's attack missed. He was stunned for a moment before he reacted. When he looked up, he saw that Li Daochong was about to kill. The Blood Ape King was fuming with anger. The Blood Knife Society had never been played like this before. He stomped his feet and shot into the air. Clang! The Tsang Ink and the Blood Knife Society clashed, producing an ear-piercing sound. Chapter 394. Give you 10 seconds? Or die. Cha Deli suspected that there was something wrong with his ears. Who did this brat think he was? A Yuanying cultivator? If that was the case, Cha Deli was terrified immediately. This brat, who was merely at the early stage of Jin Dan, dared to say such words to him. What a joke! Cha Deli's eyes flashed with killing intent. He wanted to tear this brat into pieces. The Blood Ape King and Li Daochong exchanged a blow, but neither of them had the upper hand. How could this brat be so strong? The Blood Ape King's arm was slightly numb from the impact, and his eyes were filled with shock. Li Daochong moved back a few meters, holding the Tsang Ink in his hand. There was a crack on the blade, and the Tsang Ink was injured. The Blood Ape King's blood saber was a mystical spiritual treasure, which was 1 grade higher than the Tsang Ink. In a fight of the same strength, the Tsang Ink was at a disadvantage. At the Jin Dan stage, the Heaven-class superior Tsang Ink could no longer withstand the destruction of this level. Li Daochong's eyes narrowed slightly. It was time for the Tsang Ink to be upgraded. In a flash, Li Daochong transferred a stream of spiritual qi into the Tsang Ink from his palm, and it charged toward the Blood Ape King without stopping. The saber was the most domineering weapon among all the weapons. It was more ferocious than a sword, more agile than a spear, sharper than a staff, and more direct than a chain. Among the 9 short weapons, the saber was ranked first. Both the Blood Ape King and Li Daochong used sabers, but the Blood Saber was a huge saber with a huge blade. It weighed more than 1,000 pounds and was reinforced by the Blood Soul. It was an ethereal spirit treasure. The Tsang Ink's blade was not huge. It was only 4 fingers wide and was shaped like a horse chopper. It had a straight back and a longer hilt. Could be held with one hand or with 2 hands. The blade was also longer than normal blades. Not counting the hilt, it was 1.2 meters long. Including the hilt, the total length was more than 1.6 meters. It weighed about 150 kilograms. Although it was also classified as a heavy weapon, it was still far from the weight of the blood saber. However, the heavier the weapon, the better. It depended on whether the weapon was suitable for the user. After Old Ghost Zhang added the melted crystal, the Tsang Ink became a high-grade heaven-ranked magic treasure. It was still lacking an item spirit to become a mystical spiritual treasure. If it was just a fight, Tsang Ink was obviously not Blood Knife's opponent. Therefore, Tsang Ink was injured by this attack, while Blood Saber was unscathed. Although Li Daochong's heart ached, this was clearly not the time to be concerned about the weapon's damage. He shot out like lightning and slashed horizontally with the saber in his hand. There was nothing fancy about it. Li Daochong had always used the 9 split saber arts separately. This set of martial arts did not have much continuity. Each stage was independent, and its power went from small to large, and from low to high. At this moment, Li Daochong was using it continuously, starting from the first layer. This saber technique was the one that Li Daochong used the most. It was also the technique that he was most comfortable with. He had long since perfected it. However, Li Daochong was still using the 9 split saber technique in succession. Before the Jin Dan period, Li Daochong definitely would not have dared to do this. This was because if he did, before he could finish using the saber technique, he would already be a lamp without oil. With the endless supply of spirit chi from Jin Dan, this saber technique, which should be a heaven-ranked technique, could be used continuously without restraint. The first layer, shattering rock and splitting earth. The second layer, collapsing mountain and splitting earth. The third layer, splitting earth and sinking sea. The fourth layer, breaking sky strike. The fifth layer, splitting star strike. The sixth layer, splitting sun strike. The seventh layer, splitting void. The eighth layer, splitting air strike. The ninth layer, 9 split saber. In the void, the Tsang ink-colored saber light scattered in all directions like a heavenly maiden scattering flowers. It lit up the entire night sky, and even the light of the half-moon was covered. The Tsang ink saber in Li Daochong's hand flashed with lightning as it was swung out again and again. After the Blood Ape King received 3 saber attacks, blood seeped out from the web between his thumb and forefinger. Shocked, he did not dare to hold back anymore. The Blood Moon saber technique was used at full power. This technique was the famous technique of the Blood Ape King. Once, when he was fighting for territory with other underground forces in the Outer Ring Star area, he used this technique to kill dozens of powerful opponents. This was one of the few complete techniques that had been passed down from the demon race. Although it was only a common mystery technique and had not reached the level of a spiritual martial technique, it was still a very powerful technique. Without the Jin Dan period, he would not even be able to use it. Dang dang dang, boom boom boom. After every crisp sound in the void, there would be a loud explosion. Under the intense collision of the 2 powerful forces, there would be a shocking explosion. In a few seconds, no one knew how many saber attacks had been exchanged. No one could see clearly. The dazzling light almost made everyone unable to look at it directly. The cultivators of the Blue Bay Star were completely scared out of their wit. They stood in the cage with their mouths agape as they looked at Li Daochong, who was fighting the Blood Ape King to a draw. That was a peak Jin Dan cultivator. Everyone's brain could not process it. They had once again underestimated Li Daochong's strength. Transparent liquid flowed out of Orson's nose. He had always thought that he still had a chance to catch up to Li Daochong, or at least get close. But after seeing Li Daochong in action once, he knew that the next time he saw him in action, this guy's strength would definitely increase by leaps and bounds. Li Daochong's growth speed could no longer be estimated using common sense. It was so heaven-defying that it was unbelievable. Gu Chao and Aokachuan, the two geniuses of the Blue Bay Star, looked at each other and saw bitter smiles on each other's faces. Half a year ago, they were above Li Daochong in terms of fame and strength, but now they could not catch up. What was even more frightening was that Li Daochong was only at the early stage of the Jindan realm. He was now fighting against someone who was 3 small realms higher than him. The Blood Knife Society was even better. The cultivators who had escaped earlier were floating a few kilometers away and watching from afar. They were completely dumbfounded at this moment. The Blood Knife Society had originally come to the Blue Bay Star to torture people. They were allowed to wreak havoc in this rural area. Who would have thought that there would be such a monster here? He was actually able to fight the Blood Ape King to a draw. This was 2F** King terrifying. The more Cha Deli watched, the more shocked and scared he became. He lowered his head and looked at the key in his hand. He had to consider whether he should guard the door or not. 7 or 8 seconds had already passed. Boom! Another earth-shattering sound rang out. Cha Deli was so scared that his head shrank back. Without any hesitation, he quickly turned around and opened the spirit energy magnetic cage. The dozens of cultivators from the 3 great clans finally regained their freedom. When the Blood Ape King saw this, he was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Cha Deli, you're afraid of him, but aren't you afraid of me? Who told you to let them go? Cha Deli gulped. Boss, this kid's level has far exceeded our expectations. Let's not even talk about whether we can kill him. Even if we can, if the Federation finds out that the Blood Knife Society killed such a monstrous genius, they won't let us go. The Blood Ape King snorted coldly. Humph, not long ago the shifters from the Kuan Empire contacted me. If the Shenghua Federation dares to touch the Blood Knife Society, I'll just go to Kuan. In the Kuan Empire, Cha Deli's heart skipped a beat. His hanging heart calmed down a little. When he saw Li Daochong's heaven-defying combat power, his desire to go on a crusade had completely disappeared. A super genius like this would be protected anywhere. Once he matured, he would be an important force in resisting the Hades. Don't go anywhere. Just stay in the Blue Bay Star. It's pretty good here. Chapter 395. The Blood Ape King sneered. Let's see if you have what it takes to keep me here. Li Daochong glanced at the chipped song ink. If it wasn't for the fact that his weapon wasn't good enough, he would have defeated the Blood Ape King just now. You're just a sparring partner for me after I enter Jindan. Li Daochong's voice wasn't loud, but it could still be heard from a few kilometers away. Hiss! The self-cultivators who were watching from afar all gasped. Didn't Li Daochong mean that he wasn't serious about the fight with the Blood Ape King? How arrogant. Kid, do you think I'm serious? It's time to end this. The Blood Ape King's face darkened. Immediately after, the Blood Ape King's body expanded rapidly. His already thick hair grew crazily. Li Daochong floated in the air and watched the Blood Ape King's transformation quietly. He had no intention of taking advantage of the situation. The Blood Ape King continued to grow and turned into a crimson giant ape in an instant. With a thud, he landed on the ground. A small crater appeared on the ground. The crimson giant ape that the Blood Ape King transformed into was like a wild beast. It was more than 10 meters tall, and its arms were as thick as trees. Its palms were as big as a small house. This reminded Li Daochong of a movie called King Kong from his previous life. Other than the color of its hair, there wasn't much difference. Oh, and that face, it was even more wrinkled than King Kong. The Blood Ape King's demonic aura soared to the sky. It was stronger than before, and its aura spread a few kilometers away. The rats that were hiding in the holes all came out of their holes and fled as if they had sensed danger. Li Daochong slowly descended from the sky. Song Ink tossed it into his storage bag. Song Ink couldn't withstand a higher level of battle. If he continued using it, it would shatter completely. This meant that Li Daochong couldn't use the 9-split saber technique that he was best at. However, this was not a problem. He still had a lot of trump cards, such as the 10th level talisman, the Fist of Rupturing, and the Heavenly Thunder spell Eye of Thunder Punishment. Li Daochong had entered the Jin Dan realm, and the strength of his telekinesis had once again condensed. It was more than 3 times stronger than before, and when it spread out, even the wind and the grass within 100 kilometers would not be able to escape his detection. When it condensed into a line, it could even extend more than 1,000 miles. It was enough to be comparable to a peak Jin Dan cultivator. With a test subject like the Blood Ape King, it would be a waste not to use it. Li Daochong really wanted to know how strong he was after his advancement. The experiment began. The Blood Ape King let out a deafening roar and slammed its giant palm down at Li Daochong. Dodge! Orson, who was watching from afar, sensed the power of the Blood Ape King and said nervously. However, in the distance, Li Daochong had no intention of dodging. He stood there and looked up at the falling giant palm. The only one who did not leave the battlefield was Hu Ling. Even Cha Deli kept a distance, not wanting to be affected by the aftermath of the battle between the two monsters. Hu Ling-er's eyes flashed with a strange light. She muttered, "Is he going to take it head-on? Isn't he looking down on the Blood Ape King too much?" The transformed Blood Ape King can move mountains and fill seas. His strength has increased exponentially. The peak Jin Dan cultivators of the human race are no match for him. With this palm, even a small shuttle would be smashed into a metal pancake. Li Daochong looked at the giant palm and muttered, "The 5th style of the Fist of Rupturing, Sky-Piercing Strike." The punch was ordinary, as if it was just a simple punch in the air. After the Blood Ape King transformed, his mind was slightly deranged. Before the demon race reached the Yuanying realm, it was very difficult for them to completely stabilize their minds after transforming. Their bestial instincts would take over. The Jin Dan realm was much better, but those below the Jin Dan realm would basically lose their minds after transforming. Roar! The Blood Ape King let out a loud roar and increased the strength of his giant palm. In the distance, the cultivators of the Blue Bay Star could not bear to watch. A few female cultivators turned their faces away, as if they could already see the scene of Li Daochong being smashed into meat paste by the giant ape. Thump, thump. The scene of Li Daochong being smashed into meat paste did not happen. The giant blood-red ape's palm slammed down and covered Li Daochong's entire body. However, it immediately stopped and could not press down any further. At that moment it seemed to have stopped. Then, the giant ape was rebounded by some kind of huge force. Its giant palm seemed to have been flung away by something huge. Even its giant body could not stand steadily and fell to the ground. Li Daochong stood there as if he did nothing. He jumped lightly onto the giant ape's chest and punched again and again. Thump, 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 the sound of drums shook the sky. The entire Tianyuan city was trembling. Every time Li Daochong's fist landed on the giant ape's chest, a small dent would appear on its rock-hard and wall-like chest. In the time it took to take a breath, Li Daochong had punched hundreds of times. Countless fist-shaped dents appeared on the giant ape's chest. Li Daochong's punches were extremely powerful. Even when he used the Fist of Rupture, he only left a dent on the giant ape's chest. If he had hit any other object, he would have been able to shatter it with a single punch. A peak-stage golden core transformed Great Demon was able to withstand Li Daochong's terrifying punch with just his physical body. Even the crack effect was blocked. Li Daochong could not help but be shocked. The demon race's physical body was indeed powerful. It was something that humans could not compare to. When one's body grew larger, their agility and speed would naturally decrease. This was unavoidable. However, their strength would increase crazily. Their resistance and defense would also increase exponentially. By the time the giant ape reacted, Li Daochong had already finished punching. The giant ape spat out a mouthful of blood. For such a huge creature, this mouthful of blood was as much as a vat. Li Daochong tapped his foot and leaped back, dodging the blood rain. The moment he leaped, he reached out and grabbed a large handful of blood-colored ape hair. With a fierce tug, he tore off a large clump of blood. Roar! The giant ape's mouth was full of blood as it let out a painful roar. The cultivators watching from afar, whether they were the cultivators of the Blue Bay Star or the cultivators of the Blood Knife Society, all opened their mouths wide and looked at Li Daochong as if they were looking at a monster. He actually made the giant ape vomit blood. From afar, Li Daochong looked like a little person from the Little Kingdom, while the giant ape was of normal size. The little person jumped onto the giant's chest and punched it a few times. The giant vomited blood. This kind of visual impact made people dumbfounded. Hu Ling-er's beautiful eyes bloomed with dazzling brilliance, and the way she looked at Li Daochong suddenly changed. When Li Daochong appeared, Hu Ling-er felt pressure, then curiosity, then anticipation, and now she was completely attracted. The beastly nature of the demon race always existed in their bones. The law of the jungle had always been an unchanging law within the demon race. Demon women only liked the strong. As for what they looked like, what body shape, and what race they were, it didn't matter to them at all. Natural selection, survival of the fittest, was the way of the king that the demon race believed in. This was the case during the demon race's heyday, and it was even more so now that the demon race had declined. The demon race needed to mate with the strong to produce a powerful next generation. The nine-tailed fox clan was almost wiped out by the Hades. Hu Ling-er shouldered the responsibility of revitalizing the nine-tailed fox clan. The reason she joined the Blood Knife Society was because she had her eyes on the Blood Ape King. However, the Blood Ape King wasn't enough to tempt Hu Ling-er. She only wanted to obtain the Blood Ape King's demon essence. She was going to wait until the Blood Ape King became Yuanying before taking it. After obtaining the demon essence, Hu Ling-er could directly give birth to a demon fetus without a male demon. Moreover, the nine-tailed fox bloodline would be completely preserved and would not be diluted. In fact, the best choice for a nine-tailed fox was a human. The demon race's bloodline would almost never be diluted. It might even be stronger and have the spirituality of a human, weakening the beastly nature. However, the biggest drawback of mixing with a human was that the probability of producing a next generation was very low. It might take 100 years or even longer to conceive. If luck was bad, it might not even be possible to conceive in a few hundred years. If she couldn't meet a truly talented human, waiting endlessly was meaningless. Hu Ling-er didn't want to wait that long, so she targeted the Blood Ape King. There weren't many powerful demons in the Shenghua Federation. The selection was very low. Hu Ling-er didn't want to go outside the Federation for the time being. The three cultivation empires were too dangerous. If she wasn't careful, she would be in danger. This was because humans had never given up on enslaving demons. The Shenghua Federation was much gentler to demons than the three cultivation empires. This was mainly because of the threat of the Hades. The Shenghua Federation needed all allies and couldn't make any more enemies. Hu Ling-er looked at Li Daochong with two little stars in her eyes. Bone age less than 20 years old. Early Gene Dan. There probably weren't many of them in the entire human race. While Hu Ling-er's thoughts were running wild, Li Daochong and the giant Ape King's battle continued. The Blood Ape King spat out a lot of blood, but it didn't hurt his foundation. He only spat out a mouthful of blood from his chest. Roar! The giant Ape King roared again. However, this time, it wasn't out of anger but pain. Crack, 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 the giant ape king's bones began to shrink, making ear-piercing sounds as if bones were breaking. Its huge body shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. The Blood Ape King saw that he couldn't defeat Li Daochong with his strength. Instead, he became even more of a burden, so he entered his second battle form. In the next moment, the 10-meter-tall giant Ape King shrank to 2 meters tall. The fist marks on his chest disappeared as if they were never there. You should be proud to be able to force me to use my second form, the Blood Ape King said seriously with a vigilant expression for the first time. I won't feel proud when fighting against you because you're too weak, Li Daochong replied calmly. As he spoke, Li Daochong took out a talisman. It was the talisman he made before entering the spatial rift to protect himself. Li Daochong didn't know how powerful his first creation was. It was time to see its effects. Li Daochong already had a rough understanding of the Fist of Rupturing's power. Naturally, he wanted to test it out. Too weak? Kid, you'll pay for your arrogance with your life. My second form can take a hit from a Yuanian cultivator, the Blood Ape King said proudly with anger. Really? Are all the Yuanian cultivators you met crippled? Li Daochong didn't care. Contempt, complete contempt. The Blood Ape King was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He roared, I'm going to kill you. He shot out like a cannonball. Boom. His speed instantly broke through 10 times the speed of sound. Even the space shook and exploded. Li Daochong shook his hand and a level 10 talisman flew out. Boom. A mushroom cloud with a diameter of over 100 meters shot up into the sky. Half of the sky was dyed red by the raging flames. Everything within a few kilometers was set ablaze. The power of the explosion was extremely terrifying. Li Daochong slid back a few hundred meters to avoid the center of the explosion. The level 10 talisman seemed to have entered a completely different level. Its power was beyond imagination. It was even more powerful than the simple level 10 talisman that Li Daochong had obtained from Wenwan for the first time. An enhanced level 10 talisman. The Blood Ape King's attack seemed insignificant in the face of the level 10 talisman's explosion. The blood-red ape was sent flying and its fur was set ablaze. Little Chong, didn't you say to pluck the monkey's fur? Why did you change to burning it? Li Tianyang's voice came from behind Li Daochong. He seemed to be a little dissatisfied. I plucked a bunch just now. The monkey smell is too strong. Let's burn it. Li Daochong replied. Hu Ling heard the conversation between the father and son and blushed with shame. Did they really think the Blood Ape King was a monkey? Chapter 396. The Blood Ape King's long hair was instantly burnt to ashes. The flame of a level 10 talisman had reached the level of Yang fire. It was fatal to any living creature. The Blood Ape King released his demonic aura with all his might and barely managed to extinguish the fire. He looked rather pathetic. His blood-red long hair had already been burnt to ashes, as if he had just crawled out from a pile of charcoal. His skin was also burnt. You. The Blood Ape King glared at Li Daochong, so angry that he could not speak. Li Daochong was very satisfied with the power of his first level 10 talisman. He estimated that it could kill a mid-stage Jin Dan cultivator and pose a greater threat to a late-stage Jin Dan cultivator. As for a peak Jin Dan cultivator, the level 10 talisman could not cause fatal damage to him, but it could still hurt him. The Blood Ape King only suffered superficial burns after taking the level 10 talisman head-on. Demons were indeed physically strong. If a peak Jin Dan cultivator were to take it head-on, he would not be able to take it. The Blood Ape King was furious. He was the leader of the Blood Knife Society, but he was being played around by a brat who had just entered the Jin Dan stage. I want you dead. The Blood Ape King roared. Demonic aura surged out of his body. After taking the level 10 talisman head-on, the Blood Ape King could still release such a strong aura. Even Li Daochong was impressed by his resistance. Of course, this was also because Li Daochong did not have a matching weapon. If Tsang ink was a mystical spiritual treasure, the Blood Ape King would have been a pile of flesh and blood by now. The Blood Ape King seemed to have lost his mind. His bestial nature was completely triggered. He charged towards Li Daochong like a ferocious beast. An invisible force pierced through the void and shot towards the Blood Ape King. The Blood Ape King, who had just charged towards Li Daochong, suddenly stopped. A whirlpool appeared in his furious eyes. This strange scene caused the cultivators watching from afar to be baffled. He wondered what Li Daochong had done to the Blood Ape King. Li Daochong's current psyche power was not only boundless and profound, it was terrifyingly strong, and it was also silent. Even Jin Dan cultivators could not detect it. Of everyone present, only Hu Ling sensed it. Hu Ling-er's expression became more and more painful. She let out a soft groan and hurriedly cut off the psychic power that was controlling the Blood Ape King. Almost at the same time, Li Daochong turned to look at Hu Ling-er, and their gazes met. Thud! The charcoal-like Blood Ape King fell on its back, no longer breathing. "Has he always been under your control?" Li Daochong asked. "It can't be considered as controlling. It's just affecting some of his consciousness." "I'm not deliberately controlling anything," Hu Ling-er calmly replied. "Then I have to thank you. If you hadn't affected his consciousness and made his soul unstable, my psyche power attack would have been able to kill him in one blow. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to hurt him," Li Daochong said with a smile. After Li Daochong released his psyche power attack, he immediately sensed the situation in the Blood Ape King's soul. He had actually pierced through the psyche power defense of a peak Jin Dan cultivator so easily. This was a little too easy. But soon Li Daochong sensed another psyche power thread hidden in the Blood Ape King's soul. However, when he sensed it, the psyche power thread immediately retracted. It was also at that moment that Li Daochong discovered Hu Ling-er. Hu Ling-er looked at Li Daochong with interest as she replied, "Little brother, you're making fun of me. Why do you need my help? With your ability, killing the Blood Ape King would be a piece of cake. You've been toying with him from the beginning. Am I right? I've already used my full strength. You overestimate me. However, you seem to be stronger than him, even though your cultivation is only at the mid-Jin Dan stage." Li Daochong suddenly smiled, and there was a strange look in his eyes. He clenched his fists as if he was about to start a fight. Hu Ling-er sensed danger and quickly retreated. "Little brother, you're strong. I won't fight with you. Can you let me go?" "I can't." Li Daochong's answer was very straightforward. Hu Ling-er was already prepared to escape at any time. Therefore, when Li Daochong showed that he was about to fight, she immediately activated the Divine Wind shoes on her feet. Coupled with her flying technique, she was as fast as lightning, even faster than the Blood Ape King. However, Hu Ling-er only flew a few hundred meters before Li Daochong appeared behind her and punched. Hu Ling-er's beautiful face revealed a look of shock. What kind of speed was this? In a hurry, Hu Ling-er raised her hand to block. She was wearing white silk gloves. Bang! With a muffled sound, the huge fist hit Hu Ling-er's hand. Even though she was wearing soft silver gloves, she still felt the bones in her hand shatter. Hu Ling-er used the rebound force to increase her speed. "Little brother, can you let me go?" As Hu Ling-er flew, her eyes suddenly emitted a strange light as she looked at Li Daochong. "Hypnosis?" Li Daochong smiled. "It's useless against me." Almost at the same time, blue-gold lightning flashed in Li Daochong's eyes. He was about to use Heavenly Thunder Art, Eye of Thunder Punishment. Hu Ling-er turned pale with fright and suddenly stopped. "I won't run. Little brother, please stop." Just as she spat out the 8 characters, Li Daochong crashed into Hu Ling-er's chest. Li Daochong didn't expect this demon fox to suddenly stop. He didn't have time to stop and crashed into Hu Ling. Hu Ling took the opportunity to hug Li Daochong. She purposely gasped and leaned into Li Daochong's arms. By the time Li Daochong reacted, Hu Ling was already in his arms. The soft touch made his heart beat faster. This demon fox was really a disaster. Li Daochong's willpower was strong enough, but his mind was still unstable. No wonder the Blood Ape King fell for it. Little brother, I won't run. You can do whatever you want. Hu Ling fell into Li Daochong's arms and put on a look of being at his mercy. Li Daochong's eyes flashed with blue-gold light. His mind immediately returned to normal. He grabbed Hu Ling-er's hand and flew back. The Blood Knife Society's cultivators who were watching from afar saw the Blood Ape King fall and Hu Ling-er being chased. They didn't have the heart to stay any longer and scattered in all directions. Li Daochong put Hu Ling-er down. If you run, I'll kill you. After saying this, he broke through the air. Hu Ling-er curled her lips and bit her lower lip. You don't know how to be gentle with women. Li Daochong naturally didn't hear Hu Ling-er's complaints. In an instant, he captured all the Blood Knife Society's cultivators who had scattered in all directions. In just a few minutes, the 9 Blood Knife Society's cultivators who were still alive were all captured, including Cha Deli. The 9 Blood Knife Society's cultivators didn't dare to resist. They all knelt on the ground and trembled. Li Daochong glanced at them and said, I just said that the Blood Knife Society shouldn't go anywhere and should stay in Blue Bay Star. Didn't you hear me? Exalted Immortal, please spare our lives. The 9 people said in unison. Cha Deli buried his head deep in the ground. His eyes kept rolling. He had just killed several Blue Bay Star's cultivators. It would be hard to let him go. Suddenly, Cha Deli threw out several talismans and turned into a lion. He ran toward the Blue Bay Star's cultivators. He wanted to take hostages. The talismans didn't explode at all. They were annihilated by the lightning in Li Daochong's eyes. Cha Deli's speed was extremely fast after he transformed. However, he stopped in place after just 2 steps. A spiral vortex appeared in his eyes. He fell to the ground with a thud. Just like the Blood Ape King, he didn't make a sound. Only his abdomen was moving up and down, indicating that Cha Deli was still alive. The strange thing was that he didn't transform back into his human form. Instead, he maintained his lion form. The remaining 8 members of the Blood Knife Society were even more frightened. Cha Deli was the strongest person in the Blood Knife Society apart from the 3 elders. However, he was like a chicken in front of this young man. He could be killed with a snap of his fingers. They didn't even know how this young man did it. The 8 people couldn't help but tremble. They felt that they were going to die. From today onwards, the Blood Knife Society will be dissolved. The society will belong to the Li family. Li Daochong looked at the 8 people and said word by word. The 8 people didn't dare to say no. The fate of the Blood Knife Society's president, the Blood Ape King, was unknown. Of the 3 elders, apart from Hu Ling-er, the other 2 were dead. Granny Blood Demon's life tablet was the first to shatter. The rhinoceros monster was killed by Li Daochong before Li Daochong fought the Blood Ape King. He died the fastest and didn't suffer much pain. Of the 3 hall masters of the Law Enforcement Hall, Shaimo was tied up with a hemp rope. His body was charred black. He died the most unjustly. Because he was the closest, he was shaken by the aftermath of the battle between the Blood Ape King and Li Daochong. He was already half crippled. When the level 10 talisman exploded, he was in the center. He was directly burned into charcoal. He couldn't be more dead. Right after Cha Deli fell, the other hall master of the Law Enforcement Hall, Quinn, was captured by Li Tianyang. The only remaining core member of the Blood Knife Society was Hu Ling. However, she seemed to have been captured as well. Chapter 397. When Li Daochong went to capture Hu Ling Cha Deli gave the blood knife warship the highest order to destroy Tianyuan City. Fang Jie was the highest commander of the remaining people on the blood knife warship and the head of the Blood Knife Society's Blood Knife Hall. Fang Jie was dumbfounded when he received the news. He didn't know what to do, but in the end, he clenched his teeth and gave the order to attack. All the doors of the Blood Knife warship opened and hundreds of miniature armed shuttles flew out. The total military strength of the Blood Knife Society was equivalent to a regiment of the Cultivation Army, and it was a regiment of the regular army. The overall strength of the Blood Knife Society was still very strong. This force was destructive to the Blue Bay Star. There was no way to resist it. Although the local army of the Blue Bay Star was not small, with an entire division, they were very weak. The average combat strength of the soldiers was only at the 7th level of the Qi refinement realm, the regimental officers were only at the middle stage of the Qi condensation realm, and the highest commander was at the foundation establishment realm. They lived like princes and didn't have any real combat experience. When the soldiers saw the miniature armed shuttles of the Blood Knife Society, they were so scared that their legs went weak, let alone fight. LV Xing, who was stationed in Tianyuan City, felt his heart rise to his throat when he heard the explosion in the distance and the ground shake. Who on earth dared to resist the Blood Knife Society and cause such a fierce battle to break out? LV Xing racked his brains but couldn't think of any force on the Blue Bay Star that could go against the Blood Knife Society. Was it a one-sided massacre by the Blood Knife Society? This was the only possibility LV Xing could think of. Otherwise, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't think of any other possibility. In fact, during this time, the local army of the entire Blue Bay Star was mobilizing their forces. The highest commander, Gu Jialuo, gave the highest order. Thousands of armed shuttles were lying in ambush outside Tianyuan City. The local army's duty was to protect the Blue Bay Star. Gu Jialuo tried to send a message several times, but he couldn't. The entire Blue Bay Star was enveloped by an invisible magnetic field. The spirit magnetic equipment on the Blood Knife warship was far more advanced than the ones on the Blue Bay Star. Commander, the Blood Knife Society has begun their operation. A young man dressed as an officer quickly ran over to report. Gu Jialuo's face was gloomy and blue veins were popping out on his forehead. After becoming the supreme commander of the Blue Bay Star local army, his days had been pretty good and comfortable. Today, the Blood Knife Society had suddenly mobilized a large number of people to come here because someone had killed 4 of their subordinates on Blue Bay Star. Which idiot was it that provoked the Blood Knife Society? It's fine if you want to die, but why did you have to drag Blue Bay Star down with you? The fierce battle in the slums of the western suburbs of Tianyuan City made Gu Jianluo's heart tremble. How did this guy provoke the Blood Knife Society to make them so angry? Even Gu Jialuo didn't dare to imagine what kind of existence could create such a commotion. The energy fluctuations detected by the spirit detector had already reached a critical point. The unmanned flying shuttles sent out in the air returned with even more shocking information. The slums no longer existed. Commander, what should we do? The officer was at a loss. What else can we do? Retreat. Gu Jialuo issued the order. This. The officer hesitated. What? Do you think our army can defeat the Blood Knife Society? Gu Jialuo glared at him. Boom. As soon as Gu Jialuo's voice fell, a loud noise came from outside. A beam of spiritual light shot over and destroyed a flying shuttle next to the command ship. The Blood Knife Society's miniature armed shuttles had already arrived. It's over, it's over. Gu Jialuo sat down on a chair in a daze. He felt that his life was going to end here today. Gu Jialuo didn't expect that a mere Blue Bay Star would encounter such a situation. Flames also rose in Tianyuan City. The Blood Knife Society really started to bombard Tianyuan City. On the other side, LV Xing's situation was even worse. Fang Jie led a group of Blood Knife Society's Foundation establishment cultivators out of the armed shuttles and attacked LV Zheng's garrison first. Half of the soldiers were killed in the blink of an eye. They couldn't resist at all. In Tianyuan City, cries and screams were heard one after another. The people didn't know what was going on. They were suddenly attacked crazily, as if the end of the world had come. Yin Ping and Li Qinyao didn't go far after escaping. Instead, they stopped at a shuttle parking lot on the top of a building in Tianyuan City, more than 10 kilometers away. Li Qinyao used the spiritual light telescope to observe the battle in the distance. When they saw the Blood Ape King fall on his back, the two girls hugged each other excitedly. Then, Li Qinyao started the shuttle and flew in the direction of the old house that had been razed to the ground. But after flying for a short while, the scene around them changed. Several miniature armed shuttles suddenly appeared and started to attack the shuttles passing by. They also threw down spiritual bombs from time to time. In an instant, the brightly lit streets were turned into a sea of fire. The shuttles flying back and forth were in a mess. Some crashed, and most of them were shot down by the armed shuttles. In her panic, Li Qinyao couldn't avoid being hit by a flying shuttle that was in a mess. She staggered for a while and was targeted by an armed shuttle. Fortunately, Li Qingyao's shuttle had been modified and had a certain level of defense. It was hit by the spiritual light gun twice and was blocked by the protective shield. But the third time, it wasn't so lucky. It hit the engine directly. The shuttle lost control and fell from a height of hundreds of meters. The two girls' minds went blank. If they fell from such a height, they would be smashed into meat paste instantly. The shuttle would also be smashed. When they were dozens of meters from the ground, the two girls hugged each other tightly and closed their eyes, waiting for the arrival of death. A few seconds later, the two girls found that they were still hugging each other and feeling each other's body temperature. The expected explosion and flames didn't appear. They didn't feel any pain either. The two girls slowly opened their eyes and were surprised to find that the completely malfunctioning shuttle had stopped in the air for some reason. Outside the window, a familiar face was looking at them with a smile. "Young master." "Brother." The two girls spoke at the same time. Li Daochong had been dividing a trace of his psychic power on Silver Bottle and Li Qinyao. As long as the two girls were in danger, he would sense it. The two girls came out of the shuttle. Their small faces were still pale. The thrilling scene just now hadn't completely disappeared from their minds. Behind Li Daochong, dozens of cultivators from the three great clans of Blue Bay Star lined up neatly and respectfully followed Li Daochong. Li Daochong turned to Orson and said, "I'll leave the two of them to you. When I come back, if they lose a single hair, I'll throw you into the Blue Bay Strait to feed the fish." Orson glared and said, "Why are you giving them to me? I'm going to start a massacre. Just arrange for others to protect them." Li Daochong grinned. "I don't trust others." Orson was stunned. He curled his lips and held his head with both hands. "All right, since you said so, I'll take it." Li Daochong nodded slightly and then said to the others, "For your Blue Bay Star, kill them." After saying that, Li Daochong soared into the sky. A ray of light flashed and the three armed shuttles in the air were instantly destroyed. The rest of the people scattered and flew in all directions of Tianyuan City. The weakest of these cultivators was at the early stage of Foundation establishment realm. The three Jin Dan old ancestors didn't have much resistance against the Blood Ape King and the others. But in the end, they were Jin Dan cultivators and were more than enough to deal with this level of armed shuttles. Li Tianyang had a long spear in his hand. Even if he had internal injuries, he was still brave and fearless. Wherever he passed, the armed shuttles were pierced and exploded. The 8 cultivators of the Blood Knife Society, who were completely shocked by Li Daochong's strength, became the main force to clean up the armed shuttles. As a precaution, Li Daochong placed psychokinesis restrictions on all 8 of them. If they dared to betray him, he could kill them with a flick of his finger. More than half of the Blood Knife Society's armed shuttles were destroyed in just a few minutes. The remaining shuttles saw that the situation was not good and turned around to fly back to the Blood Knife warship. LV Xing resisted desperately but couldn't take a single move from Fang Jie. The difference in strength was too big. Just when LV Xing thought that he was going to die, a ray of light flashed in the air. Fang Jie and the others were shocked at first. Fang Jie's expression changed greatly. "Who is it?" There was no response. A giant fist shadow fell from the sky. Fang Jie was shocked and raised his weapon to block. Boom! The giant fist fell, and not even a trace of Fang Jie was left. The surrounding cultivators of the Blood Knife Society were all killed. LV Xing looked at the scene in front of him with a dumbfounded expression. His brain couldn't react. A young man in green clothes soared into the sky, followed by several lightning bolts. The surrounding cultivators of the Blood Knife Society were all killed. The young man in green flew into the sky. LV Xing looked at the sky in a daze, his whole body a little dazed. After a while, an explosion sounded in the distance. The Blood Knife armed shuttle, which had landed majestically in the center of Tianyuan port, kept exploding from the inside out. Half an hour later, the rioting members of the Blood Knife Society were all killed. The local army began to clean up the mess. The spirit energy field surrounding the Blue Bay Star disappeared, and the news could finally be sent out. Soon, the news of the Blood Knife Society's destruction after invading the Blue Bay Star spread throughout the Federation. The news of the Blood Ape King's death spread like a heavy bomb among the upper-level cultivators of the Shenghua Federation. The last time a peak cultivator of Jin Dan died was more than 30 years ago on the frontline battlefield. Since the Hades' offensive weakened, it had been more than 30 years since a peak cultivator of Jin Dan died in battle. The Blue Bay Star became the focus of attention for a while, but no one knew who killed the Blood Ape King. Many reporters rushed to the Blue Bay Star as soon as possible, but they didn't get any information. But when they arrived at the site of the battle, they were all shocked by the scene in front of them. Tianyuan City, a super city, was reduced to ashes in this battle. After finishing off the Blood Knife Society that night, Li Daochong returned to the Li family for the first time in more than a year. His old house was destroyed, so he could only return to the Li family. The Li family looked at Li Daochong as if they were looking at a god. This silly boy, who had been kicked out of the Li family more than a year ago, not only saved the Li family, he also saved the Blue Bay Star, reaching the Jin Dan stage before the age of 20. Everyone in the Li family sighed. It was said that 30 years in the east and 30 years in the west, but it still took 30 years. It had only been a little more than a year, and Li Daochong had undergone earth-shattering changes. Li Daochong knew that the people who had kicked him and his father out had all been exiled, so he naturally didn't have a knot in his heart. After all, the Li family was Li Daochong's root. They were his relatives who had given birth and raised him, so he couldn't bear to part with them. After returning to the Li family, Li Daochong immediately treated Li Tianyang's injuries. In one night, he healed 70 to 80% of the latter's injuries, and the rest would be healed after a few days of rest. Chapter 398. The Blood Ape King and Cha Deli's soul consciousness were killed by Li Daochong's telekinesis and disappeared into nothingness. However, the hairless Blood Ape and the Golden Lion didn't die. They just completely turned into demonic beasts and lost their intelligence. As long as the hairless Blood Ape and the Golden Lion saw Li Daochong, they would immediately tremble and crawl on the ground in fear. It was fear that came from the depths of their souls. The two demonic beasts' strength was comparable to a Jin Dan cultivator. Although the hairless Blood Ape didn't have the Blood Ape King's moves, it still had its strong physical body and Yao core. Just its physical body alone was comparable to a mid-stage Jin Dan cultivator. The Golden Lion had the strength of an early-stage Jin Dan cultivator. The two demonic beasts were also very strange. Although they were very afraid of Li Daochong, they were very close to Yin Ping. Perhaps one night, after the two demonic beasts were brought to the Li family and locked up in the dungeon, Yin Ping couldn't bear to see them covered in wounds. She secretly brought some healing liquid and applied it on the two demonic beasts, who were tied up. The next day, when Li Daochong came over, Yin Ping was still protecting the two demonic beasts. The little girl's friendliness and kindness made the two demonic beasts somewhat dependent on her. Li Daochong, who originally wanted to bring the two demonic beasts along, changed his mind because of this. He placed a telekinesis restriction on the hairless blood ape and the golden lion. As long as they had any thoughts of betrayal, Li Daochong would kill them without hesitation. With these two demonic beasts, Li Daochong could leave with a little more peace of mind. Under Hu Ling-er's control, the Blood Knife Society's assets were all transferred to the Li family. The following matters and management were naturally handed over to Li Tianyang. Li Daochong welcomed an important guest who secretly came to visit, Wei Beitong. Li Daochong already knew about Wei Beitong's visit from Tsingjiao. In fact, Wei Beitong had already arrived at the Blue Bay Star when the Blood Ape King and Li Daochong were fighting. Tsingjiao informed Wei Ziying as soon as she spoke with old Devil Zhang. Wei Ziying, who had established a battle partnership with Li Daochong during the 100 Schools Alliance exam, immediately dragged Wei Beitong to spend a large sum of money to activate the teleportation formation on planet Kangwu and directly teleported to planet Crimson Sunday. It was the same teleportation array that Li Daochong had used to leave planet Scarlet Sun for planet Kangwu to participate in the joint examination of 100 schools. This was the fastest way to travel, but it consumed an astonishing amount of resources. The cost of teleporting from Kangwu Star to Scarlet Sun Star was 300,000 elementary spirit stones per person. The Kangwu Star didn't have a teleportation array that could teleport directly to the Blue Bay Star. One would have to go to the Crimson Sun Star for a transfer and then use a small teleportation array there to teleport to the Blue Bay Star. There was only one small teleportation array in the entire Blue Bay Star, and it could only teleport to the Red Sun Star. Wei Beitong had always wanted to meet Li Daochong, but he hadn't been able to. In the end, he hadn't been able to meet him on planet Kangwu due to various reasons. As the only one-star alchemist in the Federation, Wei Beitong's status didn't need to be mentioned. He was someone who could reach the core of the Federation. Wei Beitong had been obsessed with alchemy all his life. The pure white dew pill that Wei Ziying had obtained was fake, but it was real that her injuries had been healed. Therefore, Wei Beitong guessed that Li Daochong knew how to use ancient medical technique. This was the main reason why he wanted to meet Li Daochong. Ancient medical techniques had been lost for a long time and were rarely mentioned by people nowadays. However, Wei Beitong had been refining medicine for many years and had read all kinds of ancient books. Coupled with his own understanding, he was deeply aware of the wonders of ancient medical technique. If one could heal a person's injuries without using any spirit medicine, how mysterious would that be? Although the cultivators of the ancient times were uncivilized, they also had their own unique aspects that modern cultivators couldn't compare to. When Wei Beitong heard that the Blood Knife Society wanted to kill Li Daochong, he naturally didn't agree. Due to the urgency of the situation, he didn't use the power of his family or the Shadow Serene Square. He directly teleported himself and his granddaughter to Blue Bay Star twice. Wei Beitong and Wei Ziying used the fastest speed they could to reach Blue Bay Star. When they arrived at Tianyuan City, they happened to see the scene where Li Daochong saved Li Tianyang. That round of Tsang Ink's blade aura had left a deep impression on Wei Beitong. Wei Ziying stood on Tianyuan Mountain with her mouth agape. After all, a month ago, Li Daochong was on par with her, or even slightly inferior. Only a month had passed, but Li Daochong was already able to go head-to-head with Jin Dan cultivators without being at a disadvantage. Wei Ziying felt that her worldview was being turned upside down. She couldn't imagine that a person's cultivation speed could be so fast. Furthermore, Li Daochong had already stepped into Jindan. Standing on the mountain peak, Wei Beitong shook his head and smiled bitterly. Ziying, why are we in such a hurry? He doesn't need our help at all. Wei Ziying nodded woodenly. Her beautiful eyes were wide open as she watched Li Daochong fighting the Blood Ape King at the foot of the mountain. Wei Beitong had always thought that Li Daochong was just an ordinary genius who had some fortuitous encounter that allowed him to inherit ancient medical skills. He didn't think that Li Daochong's strength would be so perverse. Even the Blood Ape King was killed by him. Furthermore, throughout the entire battle, the Blood Ape King was basically suppressed by Li Daochong. What did this kid eat to grow up? Wei Beitong couldn't understand. Could it be that there was some secret cultivation method in the ancient medical skills? Wei Beitong racked his brains and could only think of this possibility. After witnessing Li Daochong's strength, the grandfather and grandson duo didn't make a move. He didn't need their help at all. Even if they did, they wouldn't be grateful. There was no need to add icing on the cake. The grandfather and grandson duo stood on Tianyuan Mountain and watched as Li Daochong single-handedly destroyed the Blood Knife Society, one of the Shadow Serene Mill's main opponents. The Wei clan was the true controller of the Shadow Serene Mill. Wei Beitong was the head of the Wei clan. The Shadow Serene Mill and the Blood Knife Society had been fighting openly and secretly for many years. The reason the Wei clan had been holding back was because they didn't want to destroy the Blood Knife Society. After all, it would be useful in the battle against the Hades. Li Daochong didn't care so much. If the other party wanted to kill him, he couldn't possibly stretch out his neck to kill them. He would definitely kill them instead. The next day, Wei Beitong officially visited Li Daochong. This cultivator from Yuanying didn't put on any airs when he saw Li Daochong. He directly addressed him as an equal, which stunned Wei Ziying. She knew that her grandfather valued Li Daochong's ancient medical skills. She thought that her grandfather wanted to rope this kid into the Shadow Serene Mill or to help her refine medicine. She didn't expect that it would be to this extent. The Wei clan was an influential super clan in the entire Federation. Wei Beitong was even more important. He was a one-star alchemist. If the Wei clan shook, the Federation's fourth ring star zone would shake. Although the Wei clan's main power was in the fourth ring star zone, because of Wei Beitong, their clan was more powerful than the super clans or cultivation companies in the third ring star zone. With such an alchemist in charge, even if the Wei clan didn't have any geniuses, they could rely on Wei Beitong's elixirs to produce a few geniuses. Not to mention that the Wei clan already had geniuses. With the help of elixirs, there would be 2 or 3 dazzling stars in every generation. However, there weren't many Yuanying cultivators in the Wei clan. There were only 3 of them. One of them was Wei Beitong. The other 2 were in seclusion all year round and hadn't appeared for decades. The 2 were the ancestors of the Wei clan. One of them was a mid-stage Yuanying, and the other was a late-stage Yuanying. They were old monsters who had lived for hundreds of years. They lived longer than the average Yuanying cultivator and had a deeper cultivation. This was all thanks to Wei Beitong. Wei Beitong was the same. He was only a mid-stage Yuanying cultivator, but he was known as the oldest Yuanying cultivator in the Federation. He had lived for more than 500 years. Wei Ziying was born 40 years ago when Wei Beitong was traveling around the world. He met an ordinary woman in the Kuan Empire. He fell in love with her and brought her back to the Federation. Not long after, she gave birth to a son, who was Wei Ziying's father. Therefore, although Wei Ziying was young, her seniority in the Wei clan was quite high. Her seniority was similar to that of the elders. Even the oldest elder in the Wei clan had to call Wei Beitong ancestral patriarch. Therefore, one could see how prestigious Wei Beitong's status was. When Wei Beitong saw Li Daochong and called him Mr. Li, Wei Ziying was stunned. Even if the planet leader of the Kangwu planet, Huai-Yang perfected cultivator, was here, he would have to bow to her grandpa and call him senior. Grandpa called Li Daochong Mr. Li. Didn't that mean that Li Daochong was in the same generation as him? A 19-year-old kid? How was that possible? Wei Ziying couldn't understand why her grandpa valued Li Daochong so much. Wasn't it a little too much? Even if this kid was shockingly talented and entered the Jin Dan stage at 19, it wasn't unprecedented. In the history of the Federation, there were only 5 people who entered the Jin Dan stage before the age of 20. But all 5 of them had a common problem, which was that they didn't have enough stamina. 4 of them didn't enter the Yuanying stage. Only one of them eventually hatched the Yuanying from the Jin Dan stage, but he stopped there and didn't take another step forward. Success at an early age wasn't necessarily a good thing. On the contrary, it was easy to become impatient. The current number 1 person in the Federation, the Federation's divine protector, Lord Shengluo, walked the opposite path. When he was young, he didn't stand out at all. He didn't even enter the top 50 of the 100 schools examination and only entered a very ordinary cultivation school. After that, he studied step by step. Later, he joined the army for a period of time. Although he occasionally made contributions, there weren't any shocking achievements. It was just that he had shown some talent that surpassed his peers. After that, he traveled the world. After 10 years, he returned and went into seclusion. When he came out, he entered the Yuanying stage. From then on, his cultivation speed became faster and faster. After accumulating a lot, he reached the soul formation stage in 100 years and became one of the Federation's marshals. Then, after 50 years, he became the only late soul formation stage perfected lord in the Federation in 1,000 years and was given the title of Divine Protector. The number of soul formation stage perfected lords in the entire Federation could be counted on one hand. Therefore, looking at history, geniuses weren't necessarily geniuses. They were just more conspicuous at the beginning. The path of cultivation was long and difficult to say what would happen in the future. Wei Ziying couldn't understand why her grandpa valued Li Daochong so much. Mr. Li, I just want to ask, do you know ancient medicine? After a while of small talk, Wei Beitong suddenly narrowed his eyes and cut to the chase. Yes, Li Daochong replied without hesitation. Li Daochong had already guessed the reason for Wei Beitong's visit and his desire to see him. He must have found out that the spirit medicine he sold to Wei Ziying was fake. At that time, Li Daochong didn't know who Wei Ziying was, let alone that Wei Beitong was Wei Ziying's grandpa. If he had known, Li Daochong wouldn't have sold fake medicine to Wei Ziying. He would have found another way to treat her and sell it for money. The Wei family was the most powerful family in the Federation, so there was no way that fake medicine could escape their eyes. Mr. Li, you are very straightforward. I wonder if you can show it to me right now. I have been studying ancient medicine for many years, but I still can't understand it. I have always hoped that I could make a breakthrough, Wei Beitong said with great sincerity. Li Daochong nodded and glanced at the cage in Wei Ziying's hands. Inside it was a sickly little monkey. Wei Beitong had come prepared. Li Daochong stretched out his hand, and the cage flew out of Wei Ziying's hands and towards Li Daochong. Wei Beitong's eyes lit up. Mr. Li, if I'm not wrong, this is one of the qi channeling techniques, telekinesis. Telekinesis wasn't anything special. If a cultivator in the qi gathering realm practiced some high-level palm techniques, they could do it, not to mention foundation establishment cultivators and Jin Dan cultivators. However, telekinesis was a technique. The user used spiritual energy to form a field, and the effect was produced after using the technique. Li Daochong didn't use any technique, nor did he form a field. There was only a continuous flow of qi. It was as if the qi had turned into an invisible hand and reached out to grab something from a distance. The effect was the same, but the process was very different. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.